Yes. Well, good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marvin Revolt, and I'm the chair of the Oregon Liquor Commission. And we're going to call this meeting to begin. Today is Thursday, July the 20th, 2023. And if we're ready, will we call the roll?
Commissioner Curran.
She has excused absence.
Thank you. Commissioner Doherty.
Here.
Commissioner Floyd.
Here.
Commissioner Japon Carter.
Here.
Commissioner Melinas.
Here.
Chair Revolt.
Here. I still have to speak up. I know sign language.
Clear.
So, first thing on the agenda is the approval of the June 15th commission meetings. Can I have a motion? Let's just say yes.
Yes, Chair.
Lori, call the roll.
I move to approve the June 15th, 2023 commission meeting minutes as written.
Thank you.
Commissioner Doherty.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd.
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Carter.
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas.
Yes.
Chair Revolt.
Yes, thank you. We are fortunate to have Rick Gaza, who is the executive director of the Washington Liquor and Cannabis Board today. He's going to help us understand what happened in Washington State prior to them becoming privatized and after. I think this is a lesson well taught to us, and we're looking forward to it. So, Rick, whenever you're ready, if you are, then we'll begin.
Mr. Chairman, LCC commissioners, staff, and the public, it's great to be with you this morning. It was last winter that I was at the NABCA Administrators Conference and was asked to speak on this issue. What were the impacts of privatization in Washington State that happened back in 2011? I've got Laura helping with a couple of slides. I think before we talk about the impacts of privatization in Washington State, you kind of have to look back at and just share a few minutes, because Mr. Chairman and commissioners, I really want to speak less and answer questions you might have. But I think you have to start with what was the system that was changed or dismantled in Washington in 2011. And this is very similar to OLCC. If you know the history of coming out of Prohibition in 1934, many of the states in the Northwest, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Utah, all chose a control model. And so I think it's important, as we talk about what changed after 2011, to talk about what existed between 2011. And so very quickly, I'll run through the goals of our retail system coming out of Prohibition in 1934 was to limit availability and access. So we had just over 300 stores. Half of them were state-run stores in the urban and suburban areas of the state, where most of the sales occurred, 83%. And then we had contracts with individuals, as you do in Oregon for all your stores, in the rural parts of the state, like where I grew up, that accounted for about 70% of our liquor sales. Obviously, it was not cost effective for us to put a state store with state employees in a rural part of the state. So that's kind of the system that we had. We had restricted hours. I think that might be one of the reasons that the public chose to change the system, was they at times did not like the fact that we would open at 9 or 10 in the morning and close at 10 p.m. Today, they have the same hours and can have the same hours as an off-premise licensee. There was strict prohibition in advertising liquor in our state. The state could not advertise. And again, I'll make the distinction that I didn't earlier. Beer and wine sales were always able to be sold through grocers in our state. I'm talking about hard liquor or spirituous liquor. And there was no economic incentive to sell. Our state employees averaged about 17 years in our stores. Whether they sold 100 bottles that day or 1,000 bottles, it didn't matter. They were salaried employees. And that's what I mean by there was no economic incentive to sell. And we had we've had a very high compliance rate with respect to youth access to our stores, both the contract stores and the state stores. Obviously, like you, we have a large enforcement division that does compliance checks throughout the industry and did it against our own stores. And we found that our youth compliance rate was much higher than the average in the private sector. That might be somewhere between 82 and 94%. Ours could be as high as 98%. And then in general, if you take all of the 17 control states and counties around the country in Maryland that are control, and you put that against the licensed states, the open states, you're going to find somewhere between a 15 and 24% lower alcohol consumption rate in the control states in general versus the licensed states. So obviously the purpose and the goal of the system that was set up in 1934 was to limit availability, reduce access, and these are really the goals that were in place, and I think quite effective. But it may have been counter for many in the state. We can talk about that in a moment. Next slide, Laura. Obviously, just like yourselves, and this applies to open states, as you all know, and control states. Coming out of Prohibition, the tied house laws were created, and a three-tier system that says, because of the abuse before Prohibition, where the largest distillers and the largest brewers in the country basically controlled all the saloons in the country and in our state, they found a need to separate the tiers, to put a distribution tier between the producer of alcohol and the retailer of alcohol to basically prevent the domination that occurred before Prohibition, when these large companies basically controlled all the saloons. And if you know the history about that, it was tap handles, it was everything. Basically, the producer of alcohol provided that to the retailer or the saloons at that time. And so they created a three-tier tied house law to separate, to say there can be no tie between the producer, distributor, and the retailer. And even in law today in Washington, a producer, a distributor of alcohol can have no financial interest, direct or indirect, in a retailer, and vice versa. And you have that, I assume, in Oregon also. But the whole idea with the two aspects on this slide, that you would prevent manufacturers and distributors from holding financial interest. And even though we've made changes to the money's worth provision, but of course there's also language in there that prohibits manufacturers and distributors from giving things of value to a retailer. The whole idea there, again, was to try to create a level playing field so that small manufacturers who may not have the money to provide things of value to the retailer would have more of a chance in this marketplace. Next slide. And because it was Costco, I think people are aware that Costco pretty much funded the initiative in 2011, about 98% of it. And in fact, at that time, the most that had ever been spent on an initiative in state history in 2011. One of the things that people often don't know is the history of Costco. In 2004, they filed in federal court and challenged key requirements of our state's three-tier system of beer and wine distribution, arguing that they violated federal antitrust laws. There were 9 specific restraints that were challenged. And obviously, Costco is headquartered in Washington state. And these are very similar laws that you'll see in many of the control states and even in some of the open states. But this was really the heart, I believe. It wasn't just a question of Costco or the large retailers being able to sell spirits in our state. They were interested in changing the uniform pricing laws and regulations. And if you know the Costco model, obviously the ban on quantity discounts, everything else Costco bought in that store before 2011, they would agree to a quantity discount, which is why, frankly, you got the great prices that you had at Walmart at Costco for their products. There was a ban on central warehousing. Well, Costco has a central warehouse. And as you all know, for alcohol in our state before 2011, you had to have it delivered to the retail establishment from a warehouse, typically a distributor warehouse. And then the ban on retail to retail sales. Retailers could not sell to other retailers. As you all know, Costco is a wholesaler. They sell to many retailers that have accounts. And then I think really number one is probably the biggest, the uniform pricing law that basically said, if I'm a small retailer in Washington and I purchase wine, I pay the same as Costco would or any large retailer if they bought 1,000 pallets or 1 pallet. a uniform price so that there would be no advantage to the larger entities and companies over the smaller entities. And obviously that didn't work, does not work in the Costco model because everything they purchased was through a quantity discount, given the volume that they were purchasing. So I think a lot of people missed the fact when this initiative was before the people, it did not just simply allow for large retailers, and I'll talk specifically about the size of that, to be able to sell spirits as well as beer and wine in their stores, but it also removed the uniform pricing laws, which I think were the heart of the issue that Costco had, that would allow them to in fact acquire quantity discounting, central warehouse product, and then also provide retail to retail sales. And I think this is really an important aspect of what you can see that once these uniform pricing laws and regulations were removed for spirits and for wine, that the impact was going to advantage the larger companies over the smaller companies, probably the biggest impact over time that you've seen. So I think there, I just wanted to give you a context of what we had in place, of the Costco lawsuit. So that Costco lawsuit, we were successful. We weren't at the district court level, but when it went to the appellate court ruled what? That the 21st Amendment gave the states the right to determine how they wanted to regulate alcohol. And if you go back, you'll know that history. And because of that, the fact that we had a uniform prices that impacted everyone the same, it was not discriminatory. What the court said, the appellate court, was the state has the right to regulate alcohol, even more restrictive than the Alcohol Administration Act federally, as long as they don't discriminate in those restrictions or regulations. And so we were successful in that lawsuit. Then Costco went to the legislature a few years ago, and they were not successful in trying to remove these same restraints, which led to, in 2010, Initiative 1100-1105, which wasn't successful. And then the next year, Initiative 1183, which passed 5941. And so Mr. Chairman, I didn't know what you wanted me to cover next. I kind of wanted to talk specifically about the system that we had in place. I can share pieces if you'd like. We went from, just over 330 state-run contract stores to now 1,400 stores statewide. In the second initiative, 1183, the initiative sponsors chose to only allow stores with 10,000 square feet of retail space to be able to sell spirituous liquors. Some of the arguments and some of the sentiment against the first two initiatives, 1100 and 1105, the concerns were that there would be liquor stores on every corner, that any convenience store, for example, would have the ability to sell spirits, and was real concerned by the public about the idea of having greater density of liquor stores selling liquor in our state.
I think, Rick, that this is Chair Revolve. I think what I want is exactly what you're doing. I'd also like you to talk about what was the state's relationships to the licensees that may have harmed the organization.
Well, I think, like you, we're a large wine producer of the country. We're probably the second largest wine producer with over 1,000 wineries and craft wineries in our state. We also have several hundred breweries in our state and craft distillers. And so we have a very large industry, alcohol industry within Washington. And when we were in the business, the state, we did give preference to our in-state industries on the shelves, wine, spirits, and beer. It gave them an outlet for sales that probably wouldn't have been there and is difficult for them now. So that's probably an impact that we could talk about for a moment. In our state, as in many of the states that don't have a control system, for spirits, or the state is not the distributor. What we've learned over the years is we have two national distributors in our state for spirits that distribute about 96% of the spirits. So what does that mean? Well, that basically means that you've got two distributors that are basically providing most of the spirits in the state and selling directly to retailers. And oftentimes what we've heard from our local industries, wineries, breweries, and distilleries, is it's hard for them to get on the shelf. Many of their sales, whether they're a distillery, a winery, or a brewery, are coming from their facilities, which is not uncommon. That's been going on. Many of their sales, we've provided them the ability to do that, as I think you have in Oregon, where they can have tasting rooms and even have restaurants within those wineries and sell from the location. One of the things that happened after privatization, it became more difficult for these wineries, breweries, and distilleries, as they shared with us, to get into the marketplace, to get on the shelves of basically the larger grocery stores where most of the sales occur. Even though the state stores were grandfathered and the contract stores were grandfathered and sold to the public, many of them closed because they couldn't compete with the larger grocers in the state that have, again, the quantity discounts they get. They can sell the product cheaper than a smaller liquor store can. And so that's some of the impact that occurred to the in-state industries. Back when we were selling as a state, we even gave shelves and aisles to our in-state industries for wine, beer, and spirits. And that was giving them, and again, you think about why would you do that? It was just parochial that you would give preference to your own state. I think that's true, but I think it was also because we wanted to create a level playing field that made the industry strong. In other words, gave the smaller producers, and they're basically most of the breweries, wineries, and distilleries in our state are small, just so like they are in your state, give them an opportunity to have access to the marketplace. And that changed dramatically after privatization. You need only talk to them. They will tell you that it's difficult for them to get on a shelf.
I'd like commissioners just to jump in as you like.
This is great. I mean, Commissioner Moralitas, for the record, it's, we've talked about it before. It's really important to hear from your perspective as the, leader of the state when this went down, because, we'll have people who are alcohol policy experts that don't understand the value of the control state system. They don't understand what's at stake when they come in and attack this system. It's a very, very important system, and preserving it has a lot of benefits that are not immediately clear to people. So I mean, I really just, the more you can share, the better, because I think it's important to for people to understand why we do what we do and why we care about this. So thank you for that. Yeah, keep going as much as you're willing to share. We'll want to listen.
I think one of the interesting things that, as I heard the comments just now, this whole idea of convenience. And so for the public, when we go back to the success of the initiative, I think there was a sense from people that they wanted the convenience of being able to pick up spirits, beer, and wine from the same location. I mean, logically, that makes sense. Why do I have to go to a separate store to purchase my spirits? Well, in our stores, in your stores, you can purchase beer, wine, and spirits. But in the mind of many of the consumers, they were concerned about the convenience or lack of convenience. Now, here's the irony of what happened with respect to that. The impact was at the Safeway that I shop at here in Olympia, the spirits are locked up in cabinets. You have to ask someone to open the cabinets in order to have access to the spirits. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which was rather bizarre from us to have the experience coming out and into privatization in 2012 and 13, was that people were stealing and there were lots of theft of spirits from our large grocers and from employees. And so you'll find in Washington, it isn't that convenient because typically in the large grocery stores, it's locked up and you have to ask someone to come and open it and choose it and then take it to the cash register. But I think as I said earlier, I think that there was a poll that was done that I can get for all of you and the public that was done several years later. And I think one of the interesting things that we learned from that poll was that had to do it over again, there were folks who were concerned about the convenience. They didn't necessarily like spirits being on the shelves of their large grocery stores or grocery stores, which is kind of counterintuitive when you think that one of the reasons that they voted for it was they wanted the convenience. But I think people had concerns, and certainly the thefts didn't help, but had concerns about it being so widely available, which is counterintuitive. And I think one of the things that was also shocking after privatization was that the price of alcohol actually went up for a period of time. The markup that we imposed as a state, that you also imposed, I believe, at distribution, had to be replaced. And so the initiative 1183 imposed additional fees, I'd call them taxes, on the distributor and the retailer. There's a 20% retail markup for spirituous liquor in our state. It has to be paid by the retailer. And for a period of time, a really high one that the distributors had to pay. And the reason for that was to make up for the markup that the state was going to lose. There was actually a court case. It went to the state Supreme Court and it failed 5-4. That was trying to make the argument that the voters were not aware when they voted for 1183 that these fees that were being imposed were actually additional taxes. And it failed, but there was an argument being made that you were not being totally straight with the voters when you were imposing fees to make up for the markup that the state removed. Because part of the argument back at the time, and I'm sure you'd hear it in your state if there was an effort to do the same, is that the state is not as efficient at running a business as someone like Costco. And what we found in our own information that we created at the time is the cost per case out of that distribution center outside of Seattle was the same as some of the larger businesses. It wasn't more expensive. In fact, the couriers, the folks that delivered and distributed the alcohol, were private businesses. The only folks that were working as state employees in our distribution center were the employees that were working the product as it came in. So there was a lot of business that was being created in our state for those folks that delivered the product who were private businesses. But I think that was one of the misnomers that people had at the time, that there's no way that the state could do it as productively, as efficiently as private business. And I think in the long run, we learned, well, if that's true, then why did the price of alcohol go up as much as 10, 15, and 20% the first year? Most of it was because they had to come up with another way of making revenue for the loss of the markup that the state had imposed at distribution.
Hey, Rick, this is Commissioner Floyd here. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's been incredibly insightful. I'm curious to know, I believe you said you had 330 roughly contract stores. Fast forward that down to present time. How many contract stores do you have?
Well, so we had, I think in that earlier slide, it was about an equal number of state stores and contract stores, even though the state-run stores accounted for about 83% of the sales. What happened is, like, I'll give you a perfect example of my hometown of Grandview, where I grew up in the Yakima Valley. There was one contract store. So in these little towns, they would have usually one contract store that would work, that would provide spirits for that town. They didn't last but maybe 2 years before they had to sell, and they sold to a local grocer. They did have the ability, because they had that contract with the state. They were kind of grandfathered in because they didn't want to harm those businesses. They gave them the ability to sell that contract or to sell that license to someone in the town, and a small grocer picked it up. That's pretty that happened a lot in the more rural areas of the state with these contract stores because we had a Safeway and an Apple in the town that I grew up. It's still there. They couldn't compete with the prices and the large grocers if they were a contract store. So they basically, either went out of business or in many cases sold to a smaller grocer or a different grocer in the same town. That's pretty much what happened. There are contract stores that are still up and running, and people still go to those stores, as well as the state-run stores that were auctioned off. And so, I mean, the most bizarre thing is that we had 6 months to auction off all of the state-run stores, and people purchased up to $250,000, $400,000 for access to that state store. Now, we told them at that time that these state-run stores that you're acquiring are in areas where large grocers sit, sometimes across the street from you. I'll give you an illustration in Tumwater, Washington, just south of me, where one of the state stores was auctioned off. There was an Albertsons, a Costco, and a Walmart, and a Fred Meyer within the distance of that store. So what do you think happened to that store? It went out of business. And so there are some that have done well as a specialized kind of liquor store. But then at the same time, you're competing against these large retail warehouse stores that have come in, Total Wine & More, for example, who the public and the consumers, I think, are happy that those stores exist, but that's going to cut into the sales of any specialized liquor stores like the old contract and state-run stores. So, I mean, I can get that information for you. I think most of them, if they didn't go out of business, saw a significant decrease in sales. And it really depended on where you're located. If that state-run store and a contract store was far enough away from one of the large grocers, you could probably be successful, and some of them are successful today.
Hey, Rick, just a quick follow-up to that. I'm curious to know, what were the impacts to the hospitality industry, your bars, your restaurants, your hotels, where they're ordering their liquor? What was the impact to your industry there?
Yeah, I think that's I wouldn't speak for them. I think so. Again, it comes down to, am I a big buyer of alcohol or a smaller buyer? So some of the complaints we hear is that if I'm a small entity, sometimes hard for me to get product, where if I'm a larger entity with larger sales, then I'm going to have, I've got a relationship, I'm making big purchases, and I'm going to have better access to product. Now, that's something to ask the hospitality industry. Honestly, I have not heard a lot of complaints about the inability to get product if I'm an on-premise licensee. But I know that some of them struggle. They struggled with our system too, to be quite honest with you. So it's not like we had a perfect system for delivery to restaurants.
Thank you.
Rick's Chair Revolve, did you notice any difference in the abuse factors, particularly for individuals that were underage, between when the state was running it and you became an open state?
Well, I knew that, just what I had shared in the earlier slide is the compliance rate in the state-run stores and contract stores was very high for youth compliance. So they didn't ever come to our state stores to try to get liquor. They have someone go to a private store, as you know, a convenience store typically, rather than a large retailer, to acquire product. We know the consumption rate is lower in the control states versus the licensed states. There was real concern initially because of the theft that was occurring. But we haven't done any studies to look at, and I don't know that they've been done to look at. We know that the sales went up significantly, and then we can get that information for you. In 2015, the Office of Financial Management, which is the governor's budget office, did a study of the impacts of privatization purely from a monetary view, and you can see it talks about significant increases in sales. I think part of that had to do with the significant increase in the fees and the taxes that were imposed on the product to make up for the markup. But you can see that there was an increase, but I haven't seen anything, Mr. Chairman, about what happened with the consumption rate in the state, when you compare before privatization and after.
Thank you.
Hi, Rick. This is Craig Prinz. It's good to, first of all, I wanted to thank you for your service. I know it's been, I think, 25 years, Rick. And so congratulations on your retirement. I hope a couple weeks in, you're starting to enjoy it. And I just want to congratulate you on your service. Rick, I'm really curious about how, so we, in COVID, we had a move to alcohol delivery to the door, to the consumer's door. And our legislature put together a bill to allow OLCC to regulate that third party, deliverer. So to make sure that they're carding people at the door, they're not delivering just to the patio where someone under 21 could get the alcohol. How did Washington handle that move during COVID of, alcohol delivery right to the consumer in your model?
I think we did it very similar to the other states, including Oregon, where obviously during COVID for a period of time, they couldn't even open the restaurants. So they were pretty much looking at delivery or takeout as their means of a business. And we did everything we could, both off-premise and on-premise sales to help by allowing for delivery and takeout for a number of years. And then the legislature, through a bill that we introduced a couple of years ago to codify those allowances. It was available for wine and beer, or wine, but it hadn't been available for spirits. And so we worked with the hospitality industry to come up with a way to allow for them to do that, certainly through COVID and even a little bit after COVID. And then one of the interesting things that happened is we started doing compliance checks, which we had never done before for delivery. And that was for those that were given the allowances as far as restaurants, but we also did compliance checks with some of our grocery stores that have been able to either deliver curbside or deliver to the home alcohol. And we were not happy with the compliance rate that we saw. It was very low. And so the legislature chose this last session to not allow third party to deliver product until we can figure out. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, I think part of it, as you know, at OLCC, if you don't do compliance checks, you're usually going to get a pretty poor compliance rate. They know in the restaurants and the grocery stores that we're coming and we're doing compliance checks, and typically that compliance rate is higher. And the more compliance you do, the better compliance rate you get. They were not accustomed to us doing compliance checks on delivery. And honestly, it wasn't just a third party vendors that were delivering that were problematic. It was the employees of the licensees themselves also that were non-compliant. So there was real concern from the governor and the legislature and the Liquor and Cannabis Board that we not go too much further until we can get a handle or get a better understanding of why we have such a low compliance rate. And when I say low, I'm talking in some instances 30, 40, and 50% when we did compliance checks, and we do them periodically now. And sometimes we'll see an uptick and then we don't. And so trying to figure out why that's happening, it's kind of mystifying for us, because when we do the compliance check, we use a vertical ID. So in our state, if you're a minor, you carry a vertical ID. As soon as you turn 21, you get a horizontal ID. So why people weren't checking, because when we do the compliance check, a minor hands a a vertical ID to the delivery person, whether it's a licensee employee or whether it's one of these third parties. And either they didn't ask or they didn't look. So kind of mystifying to us why that rate would be so low. What I would say, without criticizing the vendors or the third parties or the employees of the licensee, is they just weren't used to having any compliance checks done, which is concerning to us because it means that sales were occurring. So that's a long retort or explanation there. But I tell you what, we do have concerns about, and I've said this when I was at the NCSLA conference in June. Do compliance checks. Most of the states don't do them on these deliveries that we've codified, many of the states, to allow for it. And you have to do the compliance checks to make sure that people are being compliant. And I asked around the states, there were very few, if any other states, that were doing compliance checks. I mean, typically it's not a priority because we just haven't done it before, but it was good that we did check because we found that the compliance rate was low. So to the question, I would say, take a little bit of time and use some of your officers to do compliance checks on delivery and see what you find.
I have a question for Rick.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Javon Porter here. Thank you. I'm getting a huge education, which I really appreciate. So, did you state, or one of the slides said that you increased with the increase of stores which sold alcohol? Were there 1,500? It was increase of 1,500.
It was about a 340% increase from just under 350 to 1,407.
So, I mean, currently with the minimum amount of liquor stores, you have a certain amount of designated compliance officers. So did you have to increase those officers appreciably?
Well, Commissioner, we had already been doing compliance checks. And so all they were doing is now selling spirits. We had already, because they sold beer and wine, we were already doing compliance checks at those stores anyway, if you understand what I mean. And so it really didn't change. It wasn't that we were needing to be there more frequently. We were already going to those stores to do compliance checks for beer and wine before they were able to sell spirits.
But there would seem to be, the resources would have been spread more thin now if you had to hold more people accountable. So it seems like you had, with the conversion to privatization, you had poorer compliance, which yields poor accountability, and you have increased access. And in my experience, and I guess you can confirm this, with increased access, usually those entities, those stores are often placed in compromised communities, which contribute to all kinds of negative consequences. And then for no other reason, our big, one of the bigger obligations or commitments is for public safety, correct? And if you have youth who are the most vulnerable when it comes to binge drinking, etc., having more opportunity, that seems like it would go directly against the directive to create a livable and safer community.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think that whole issue of outlet density, the initiative, there were two initiatives before 1183 passed. The biggest concern that the public had before they changed it and said you had to have 10,000 square feet of retail space, which would mean only the large grocers could sell spirits, was the concern of the public that there would be too many liquor stores, too many outlets, in their community. And depending upon the community, as you just said, Commissioner, we know what that looks like in the open states where you've got a liquor store on every corner, it seems like, and you look at the demographic of that community and, you know where it goes. It's typically in those communities, and I grew up in a minority community where minority communities live. You're going to see larger numbers of liquor stores if you don't deal with outlet density. And so it probably worked in the initiative, the Costco initiative, that it only allowed for the larger grocers because the public would have pushed back. I think one of the things that that you have to consider if there's some discussion, I think one of the, from public health prevention community, they were outraged that the initiative passed. They were concerned about increased availability of alcohol and access and hours. And one of the things I should say is that we were given some additional funds initially for regulatory administration of privatization. Not a lot, but a little bit. But I think that's something that you have to consider. You know, one of the problems that we had in this whole fight over privatization is no one wanted to compromise. No one wanted to compromise. And I'm just going to be very blunt about that because I think it's important. Early on, and I think the situation is different for you in that we had state employees who were represented by a union in our state running those liquor stores. And early on, because I served as the legislative liaison for the Liquor and Cannabis Board, Liquor Control Board at that time, we were advocating for a transition from state-run stores with state employees to a contract model that's similar to what you have today, that we do it over 2, 4, and 6 years. We make that transition because we could see that there was enough pressure from the public to change the model. And of course, people resisted. They said no. And you know, how do you find something that everyone can be comfortable with if it's not the system that you have today? My sense would be, because I saw it with this initiative, is the grocers want it all. They don't want to share. I'm just going to be blunt about it because it's the truth. Everybody wants all of it or none of it. It's bizarre to me that people don't want to sit down and try to figure out how to make this model work. What I've come to find is it's the Liquor Control Board or the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission that has to be the referee, that has to be the balance between all of it, always knowing that the only reason we exist is a public safety agency. We're here to make sure minors don't have access to alcohol. We're here to make sure that adults don't abuse alcohol, and they do it all the time. We know that. And so I come to believe that the public, especially public health prevention, law enforcement, understands your role, understands that you are there to protect the public. That's the first most important thing. And then secondly, to help businesses thrive. I mean, how can we do both? How can we live? And I've come to believe it, and I believe it today, that the winners and losers of privatization are obvious. The losers are small companies who produce, distribute, and retail alcohol. The winners are the large companies, the biggest producers, the biggest distributors, the biggest retailers. How is that different than any other model out there for anything else but alcohol? That is the model. That's why it works for these large companies. So if it wasn't alcohol, then maybe it wouldn't matter as much, but it matters. And so I just share with you, because you raised that issue, that that it's hard for me to see where people can come to agreement if it's not going to be the model that they have today, how you can come to agreement, because it seems like everyone wants, wants the whole thing and is not interested in trying to create a system that would share that marketplace. But I think I went on too long, but I think the most important thing you said, Commissioner, is outlet density matters. The number of stores matters, and where. So I'll stop there.
Commissioners. Rick, I want to thank you very much for helping us. Just, we look at this every biennium. I was talking to someone yesterday and they said, well, is the threat greater now than ever before? And I said, no. In the 9 years that I've been on the commission, it's the same. There are industries, and rightfully so, who think that 1.6 billion or $2 billion is better on their shelf than ours. They have a better way of distributing the money. And as long as we understand that, and we don't sway from our mission as a regulatory agency with what you said is the most important, protect the public and help businesses grow. If we keep that in mind, then whatever happens down the road, we can be proud of what we've done. So I want to thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you. And anything that you think will be useful for us in the future, please don't hesitate to call. We'll be more than happy to take all the advice we can possibly get from you and your team.
Mr. Chairman, I got a little bit more time on my hands now, thank goodness. So I just retired from the state last Friday. And as I shared with you maybe a month or two ago, I'm available to assist you, get you any information you might need of the experience that we had in Washington, because I'd hate to see it happen again.
Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, the next on the agenda is the City of Portland Cannabis Policy Oversight Team. Let's report. Are they available?
They are.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Does somebody have the presentation put up?
Yep, I will do that right now.
Thank you. Next slide, please. For the record, my name is Christina Corsi, and I oversee the cannabis and liquor licensing programs with the City of Portland. I am joined here today by Phil Keim, Cannabis Policy Coordinator, and leadership from the Cannabis Policy Oversight Team, Vice Chair Bobby Benavides, and Annual Report Captain Natalie Darvis. Unfortunately, CPOT Chair Travis Maurer is unable to join us today. For those who may not be familiar, CPOT is the city's public advisory body that provides cannabis policy recommendations to the cannabis program and our bureau director. Next slide, please. It has been several months since the cannabis program presented before the commission. Since then, there have been significant changes at the city, including leadership changes, staff additions, and most notably, the transfer of 3 regulatory programs in April 2023 from the recently housed Bureau Office of Community and Civic Life to the Bureau of Development Services. These programs include noise control, liquor licensing, and cannabis licensing compliance and policy. Prior to the move, the cannabis program also had the Social Equity and Educational Development Seed Initiatives program. However, this recently transferred to Prosper Portland. Seed Initiatives was a program that allocated $1 million in ongoing funds from cannabis tax revenue for grants that prioritized projects, programs, or services that supported historically disadvantaged communities most impacted by cannabis prohibition. Those priority areas were educational development, entrepreneurship and economic development, and also social justice issues. Despite Seed Initiatives transferring to Prosper Portland, the cannabis program will continue to collaborate with Prosper to further advance the important equity initiatives within Portland-based communities impacted by cannabis prohibition and the cannabis industry as a whole. Next slide, please. For the last 2 fiscal years, the cannabis program has worked with community partners to disperse the Cannabis Emergency Relief Fund. This is better known as SERF. SERF provides one-time grants of up to $25,000 to small licensed cannabis businesses within Portland city limits and up to $5,000 to cannabis industry workers. Portland is the first jurisdiction in the United States to provide these emergency funds to those businesses and their employees who may be economically impacted from such things as the COVID pandemic, increased criminal activity, including vandalism and robberies, Oregon's devastating wildfires, and the residual effects of illness, trauma, and grief suffered from such impacts. In fiscal year 21-22, Portland City Council allocated 1.33 million from cannabis tax revenue and roughly $450,000 in fiscal year 22-23. While only a small portion of Portland's cannabis community was funded due to not only limited funds, there was also an overwhelming demand. There was an average of 74% funding rate for businesses and 95% funding rate for individuals who submitted eligible applications. Unfortunately, cannabis businesses are still reeling in hardship and require economic assistance. Therefore, the cannabis program has every intention to continue to provide resources when and where it can. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Phil Keim, Cannabis Policy Coordinator.
Okay, so this is Chair Revolve. So I want you to be prepared for us to ask questions at this point, because I know you guys have a process that you're doing, but one of the things that what we're looking at now is how and why presentations are being made. And right off the bat, one of the questions I have for you is, as a Black man, I've heard a whole lot over my lifetime about social equity. I'd like to know what you mean by social equity when you're giving away this kind of money. And then secondly, since you're giving away this kind of money, what review processes you have in place to make sure that these businesses are working to be successful and not just taking the money. So first question is, talk to me about social equity. What is that?
Social equity is providing, in our terms, it's providing funding to help those that are providing resources or services to historically disadvantaged communities. And
So,
in that,
what's that mean? I come from a socially disadvantaged community. I'm going to come to you and ask for $5,000. What are you going to do and why?
so there is a review process. And so as far as SEED initiatives goes, that review process was different than the SURF program. So SEED initiatives had a very diverse panel from large corporations to small corporations and businesses and individuals that would go over a review process of applications received. It had a point system. It would look at need. It would look at the project. It would look at the services it was providing and how it was helping the community. After that, there was a second application review process where the further applications were submitted for those that were picked in the first round and would go through another review process. There was a SEED grant coordinator who worked with these businesses on a very extensive contract, and they were required to submit invoices and supplemental documentation showing how this money was spent.
Work plan.
I'm sorry?
That's a work plan?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a contract, an agreement signed by both the bureau director, commissioners, city attorneys, and
So-
and the community that was helping.
Okay, so is this just, were they then taking a look at this company's work plan to stay in business and be in business?
Yes.
Because you build it, they don't necessarily come.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. So that is why there was the SEED grant coordinator worked extensively with whoever had received these funds to ensure that they were being spent how they said they were.
Thank you.
So for the Cannabis Emergency Relief Fund, we worked with community partners who had the most knowledge with the cannabis industry, and they submitted, anyone who was requesting these funds submitted those to the community partners who reviewed the applications. There was a lot of documentation that needed to be provided at that time in order to determine eligibility.
Okay. Please continue.
I will hand it over to Phil.
All right, we can go to the next slide. And good morning, Chair Revol and members of the commission, folks on the call. Hello, good morning. Thank you for giving us a few minutes here to talk about the work of the Cannabis Policy Oversight Team. I joined this role with the city in March, so I'm pleased to carry on the work of the annual report of last year and keep working with our volunteers going forward this year. This morning, we'll share the 2022 CPOT annual report. The three key findings last year are highlighted on this slide. Number one was a lack of data and research hinders progress toward more effective, sustainable, and equitable cannabis policy. Number two, significant work remains undone to address ongoing racial disparities and inequity within the industry. And number three, small cannabis businesses are still not afforded the necessary resources to thrive in this competitive cannabis climate. The Cannabis Policy Oversight Team and its subcommittees are a volunteer advisory body that meets to discuss issues affecting and affected by cannabis. With experts from diverse perspectives, we provide a space for folks to come together and strategize solutions to improve business, public health and safety, and the community impact of cannabis. Last year, CPOT drafted the 2022 annual report based on the information provided by its three subcommittees: local business support, competency, and community engagement subcommittees. These groups identified inequities in the Portland cannabis industry and the broader community. And the annual report's purpose is to provide policymakers with clear calls to action for policy changes rooted in the structure provided by the CHEM Pillars of Health Equity. And we can go to the next slide. This framework, the CHEM Pillars of Health Equity, was used to frame how these recommendations were made. So it was a discussion of equity from a human perspective, an environmental perspective, economic and social as well. CHEM's goal is to inform and analyze policy for creating total equity, and the specific policy recommendations and relevant action items from CPOT to the city and other policymakers are presented within the context of these pillars in this report. And next, I'll hand it over to a couple of our volunteers to discuss the annual report recommendations that were made through this report last year. So I'll hand the mic to Bobby next.
Hello, everyone. This is Bobby Benavides. I am the vice chair for CPOT. Been with the organization for about 4 months now, and I am also a business advisor at Livelihood Northwest. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide. While using the CHEM Pillars of Equity framework last year, CPOT created 4 recommendations to policymakers that aim to address the need for continuous improvement in the cannabis industry and community. The next speaker will directly ask OLCC to make some adjustments. However, in this slide, we will highlight 3 recommendations that are not addressed to the OLCC. Here we use the economic, social, and environmental equity lenses to propose some changes in Portland policy. Those being recommendation number 1, ask the cannabis program to continue supporting social equity licenses by expanding the scope of license fee reduction program. The city's cannabis program can better align with the current cannabis climate to impact a greater number of small businesses as conditions have changed over the years. Recommendation number 2, ask the cannabis program to create a category of license fee reduction opportunities for cannabis businesses that pursue specific sustainability goals that align with the city's strategic plan for a sustainable future. Businesses should address waste streams and energy consumption to become eligible for fee reductions. Our 4th recommendation, ask the city to establish a policy to solicit public feedback regarding youth and parents' perception of cannabis and the industry in Portland. There's a need for local data to inform policy decisions, and the city can lead partnerships. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Feedback regarding youth and cannabis industry, what does that mean? This is Chair Revol.
Yeah, so currently there is a fairly well understood circumstance where we still see youth consumption within the city. There isn't a lot of good data on this information, and currently the reporting methods aren't really being utilized to show what the impact of that is. So this is calling for a need to reach out and understand the public's perception on the issue and use that as a baseline for decision making down the road.
Sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Are there any, are you incorporating research and education on any level of your plan, your policy? And how are you doing that if you are?
Yeah, so a lot of these suggestions coincide with a call to action for better data. That was part of this recommendation. I believe that's what we're going to talk about next, is this call for data on the part of OLCC for further reporting information. Obviously, we want to make data informed decisions and data informed solicitations when it comes to such important matters as child youth consumption. So currently, it needs to happen alongside these other suggestions.
So answer is no, you do not currently have any, you're not currently incorporating research and or education, especially when it comes to youth.
The previous subcommittee that focused on this recommendation did look at a lot of research and studies, but they were national and not really locally focused. So the recommendation was to create some more locally focused studies through partnerships with the city and academic partners to study youth in the Portland area.
And did I understand correctly, you're going to ask for OLCC to step in and do data for the city of Portland instead of the city of Portland doing their research?
So that's actually inaccurate. And when we get to our OLCC recommendations, I'll be happy to explain that. So whenever you're ready, Bobby, we can transition to the next call to action. And I think it is important to note what CPOT's role is. CPOT is an advisory body comprised of volunteers. And so these volunteers have a deep bench of experience in the cannabis space. And so they provide policy recommendations to regulators. We unfortunately do not have the funds or the capacity to develop research ourselves or fund that, but we direct our recommendations to the right agencies in order to get the ball moving, to have actionable guidance provided to all the different regulatory bodies in Oregon.
So you don't base the policy recommendations on any research, or you do?
We do base it on research, but the question was, are we performing our own research? And so the answer is we do not have the funds available to do that as a volunteer advisory body.
And the city of Portland doesn't have funding?
The city of Portland does the funding. I'll turn that over to Christina to speak on behalf of the city.
Yes, so the cannabis program is a cost recovery program. So any funds that we receive from licensing or compliance goes into running the program, and that includes funding any type of research or data. So with these particular recommendations, CPOT had requested for the cannabis program to provide further research and data to make better policy informed decisions.
Please continue.
Bobby,
Yeah.
would you like to finish? Thank you.
I do believe we were done. I will go ahead and reiterate recommendation number 4 one last time. Recommendation number 4 asks the city to establish a policy to solicit public feedback regarding youth parents' perceptions of cannabis in the industry in Portland. There's a need for local data to inform policy decisions, and the city can lead a partnership that produces solid information. That was just to wrap up that final recommendation, and I will go ahead and pass the mic to Natalie and on to our next slide.
Good morning, Natalie Darvis, CPOT member and also the co-chair of the Cannabis Competency Subcommittee who formulated these recommendations based off of OLCC materials. I'm excited to join everyone this morning. I have worked in the cannabis space for almost 2 decades and helped formulate a lot of the policies and social equity programs across the country. Happy to answer any more questions about social equity means in cannabis, but I would like to go ahead and present recommendation number 3 from our 2022 report, which is based on the Chem Pillar of Human Equity. We have a recommendation that we are requesting the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Control Commission to review and change its educational materials to reflect how the industry is operating today. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the OLCC's marijuana worker permit education program was created after the passing of Measure 91. And since then, there's been considerable changes in the operating procedures of the industry and the terminology that is commonly used. There are also really considerable concerns for security for those working in cannabis facilities, as well as concerns around what customers are informed around cannabis consumption and use when they go into dispensaries or retail facilities. So Oregon is trailblazing in its requirement for all cannabis workers to receive education and pass a test to obtain a marijuana workers permit. There are very few other jurisdictions that have anything similar to this program in Oregon. And the contents of this education and test at this point are out of date or incorrect in the current cannabis industry today. So we worked with agents of the OLCC, and we determined that the marijuana workers permit tests and associated reading materials were written at the advent of adult use laws in the state, and they haven't actually been updated since the cannabis program rolled out in 2017. So since Oregon is one of the only states that has this permit requirement to participate in the cannabis workforce, we can greatly expand what this test and educational materials are about and make sure we have a far more robustly educated cannabis workforce, which will also lead to more safety for cannabis consumers in the state. So we're asking the OLCC to go above and beyond the general updates regarding new legislation and instead review all of the materials to include an emphasis on education and the newly adopted definition of cannabis competency drafted by the cannabis policy team that is located in the annual report that was sent to all of you. So we have some specific calls to action for y'all this morning. We would like to change the terminology in OLCC materials to reflect current generally accepted terminology. For example, changing the instances of the word marijuana to the word cannabis, change the term recreational to the term adult use, and change language referring to license types to terms the industry uses today, such as cultivation, manufacturing, retailing, and distribution. We would also like to suggest that we add units on consumer health, customer relations, and worker safety. We're proposing an update to Unit 1, Introduction and Overview, to include the newly adopted definition of cannabis competency. Also in Unit 1, to include an ethics statement that educates potential workers about the nature of their job and their responsibilities when assisting all customers, including potential medical cannabis patients. We would like to suggest adding a new educational unit focused on basic cannabis education, including specific language on the methods of cannabis ingestion, their effects and onset times. We would like to include language on the endocannabinoid system, especially focusing on how every person's system responds uniquely to cannabis products. We would like to include information on the primary cannabis molecules, being THC and CBD, and their effects both taken separately and together. We would suggest adding a description of what minor cannabinoids and terpenes are and their role, the role these compounds play in regulating human beings' endocannabinoid receptors, and as well as including analysis of the ensemble or entourage effect and from the available medical literature. We are suggesting expanding and auditing Unit 4, visibly intoxicated persons and intervention techniques, to include information on worker safety that includes tips to de-escalate situations, how to recognize red flags in customer behavior, and what to do if you suspect if someone is being human trafficked. Additionally, we would like to suggest amending Unit 4 to remove signs of alcohol intoxication that are not pertinent to cannabis retail sales. Examples of this currently in the marijuana worker permit education is can't find mouth with glass, difficulty lighting cigarette, lighting more than one cigarette, and spilling drinks. These particular references are not applicable to someone who has consumed a lot of cannabis. We understand that there needs to be an acknowledgement of having someone intoxicated come into a retail store who is intoxicated from alcohol, but I think that we need to also focus our recommendations in this educational material around what is a sign of an intoxicated person from cannabis versus alcohol, what should they do in both instances, and try to maybe separate some of these lists from what people take when they have their alcohol permit versus their marijuana workers permit. We are also suggesting adding a unit on personal safety that includes sections on what you could experience during a robbery and how to de-escalate break-ins, safety around handling of volatile chemicals and cannabis material, and includes statistics on the rates of criminal activity at cannabis facilities. We also want to provide materials on the rights of employees to not experience retaliation at work when they fear for their safety, and pull in resources from the Bureau of Labor and Industries to support further education. Upon making all of these changes and the education provided for the marijuana workers permit test, we then suggest changing and updating the marijuana workers permit test to reflect these updated contents in the educational handbook. For budgetary considerations, we were not able to get access to information to figure out what this might cost. But most of this educational material that I just referenced is readily available and generally understood. So there is a lot of information to pull from that the state could operationalize into this handbook. And we expect that this timing might take about 1 year to audit the handbook, make the changes, rewrite the tests, and release the updated materials on all OLCC channels. As someone who also has a permit to dispense alcohol in Oregon, I know how many hours of education that it takes to receive that permit. And we're asking for parity in our cannabis workforce, and that they have to understand a lot more about how cannabis works, how dispensing and retailing cannabis works in order to be safe, and what their positions of safety are within the cannabis workforce right now. I'm happy to field all questions.
That was a really nice presentation and education. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So, and you've looked into, you know, there's a lot of things you mentioned, great stuff and great stuff to just ask to aspire to. A lot of it you mentioned, just as I'm ticking it off in my head. I mean, there's like the terms used. A lot of those come from the legislature. There's, you know, you got to really start there, see what in law we can even do. A lot of the things you mentioned were also health. You'd want to approach OHA about that versus OLCC. A lot of it you'd want to approach BOLI about versus OLCC. And then, you know, just in general, these are great recommendations, but you also have to understand OLCC gets recommendations from various agencies and entities and audits and things of that nature. And in some ways, this is kind of points out that if you were to compare those, some of the suggestions are literally diametrically opposed to other recommendations that we've received from other agencies. So these are all great. And one other thing I would mention, you brought up the alcohol testing, and I don't know if you're familiar with how that works, but that's essentially those are third-party companies.
Yes, I'm very aware of how it works. Yeah. And I think that that's a model that could be adopted here for the marijuana worker permit test, especially if the state is going to have its keen oversight of those educational materials provided by the third party, which I know you do now with the alcohol education. I just think that we're missing an opportunity to provide a lot more education to our cannabis workforce. And since the OLCC is so trailblazing and having this requirement, being able to lean on what you can in terms of providing information to folks entering into the industry in the state is really critical. And since folks have to retake this every 5 years, it also provides the opportunity to update people as things are changing, not only in the legislature, but best practices within the industry itself.
Yeah, and I would just encourage you, you know, there's associations out there, there's groups. The challenge I you know, for being here for quite a while now and really I'm trying to advance this stuff. The challenge becomes a lot of these need to be coherent industry efforts that the industry's all behind and can go down and get into law and get, you know, and work with the agency. But sometimes I think if the agency is asked to do these things, the agency can be trailblazing, but it's a challenge for the agency to lead really industry focused efforts. I mean, they can be supportive, but I just don't want to set anybody up for failure or disappointment because these are a lot of great things. It's just that these I think you'd be lucky to get even through, you know, within 2 sessions to get all these things done at the legislature before it even is ready for prime time at OLCC. So yeah, it's just my thoughts on it. But you know, a lot of really great stuff, and I'm with you. I think the training could be better, but I really think that the training works well on alcohol because the stakeholders themselves essentially are the best providers of that. And maybe there's a situation where we could figure out a contract versus a bunch of entities. I don't know. There's probably a lot of things when we get to that point, but yeah, this is helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes,
any comments?
no comments at this time. Great presentation. Thank you very much. And I agree with you, Matt, that there's be a little bit of work and coordination to get any of this through.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I don't know if you're aware of is that Commissioner Militas and I were involved in the original law changes. And a lot of the information that we worked with, the industry dealt with many of the concerns that you have now. One of the areas that we continue to try to work with the industry is that there are several associations, cannabis associations, that we need them to have one voice. Because in order to do some of the changes you're asking us to be involved in, creates issues with other parts of the industry. And as Commissioner Militas talked about, a lot of what we do is predicated on Oregon law.
Mhm.
So education has always been a big issue for us, and being businesslike has always been a big issue for us. But I would ask, have you spoken with the current associations that are out there regarding your concerns and your likes or dislikes?
Absolutely. And one of the main points of our advisory body is that we are comprised of people who are working across multiple associations within the cannabis space and, are really active in the state of Oregon. I think that what I'm presenting would be widely adopted by many groups within the state of Oregon. As someone who's worked in cannabis for almost 20 years now, I can say that it is impossible to get 100% adoption of terminology or agreement on what education should be within the cannabis space. But I think that a lot of what we're presenting here for the OLCC handbook is not currently controversial. It's really taking a better look at the available medical literature. It's looking at currently used terminology, and it's also just updating the materials to provide more information to folks working in the workforce. And one of the biggest gripes within the industry from both the consumer and the business owner perspective is the lack of education of bud tenders, which is the gateway by which all consumers start purchasing cannabis products in the state. So if our bud tenders or retail associates in a cannabis dispensary facility have more education, then our consumers are also going to get better information. I understand that in terms of the health impacts of cannabis, that is more in the OHA department, but I think it's really tough for us to sort of separate the OLCC and the OHA, and when we're looking at cannabis health equity. And so I think, this does necessitate a bigger conversation between the two agencies, but I think that the OLCC is the one that has the requirement for the test, and the handbook could be far more robust. And I think looking at perhaps even an RFP process to find a third party to provide this education, such as what you're doing right now with the alcohol permit, would be really smart, especially if you set up some really robust standards and had those RFPs graded by people who really understand what's going on right now in the cannabis space and what type of education is needed, and make sure you select really qualified vendors.
Well, now I'm going to challenge you here that you come back, what you bring the different associations, because frankly, we get it from all sides.
Yeah.
You want to do, then we're hammering someplace else. And we want to work with you, but you need to bring other players to the table.
Sure.
And in doing so, then we can look at how a joint voice, doesn't have to be one voice, but a joint voice as to what the industry is willing to provide. And because we are a regulatory organization, we are often seen as a regulatory organization. And as such, we need to have the voices be more common, because right now it's not the case. And great information, we understand, particularly changing terminologies and education. But I think that what you want is not an action we can take at this time until you come with more team players to the table to help us understand and how to move forward.
Great. So is that a call to action? Would you like us to reach back out and bring together members of various cannabis associations and request an additional meeting with y'all?
Absolutely. And we don't want a whole crowd. We like the leaders of those organizations to join with the leaders of your organization to come up with some ideas and suggestions.
That sounds great. I'd be happy to follow through on that. Thank you so much for the offer.
Yeah, I would say come in, but with the understanding too, because the great thing about cannabis and the challenge about cannabis is a lot of great creative entrepreneurial people that have a lot of big ideas. Big ideas hung up against bureaucracy, it doesn't always mesh. So I would just say, figuring out step by step, bite size, what what's first, what's second, what's third, and realizing, you know, like what you're saying, there's nothing prohibiting the industry from setting up their own training system like the hospitality industry has done. So you could set that up and essentially propose it. And I mean, it's understanding the dynamics around all of it and what, you know, the art of the possible is kind of the biggest thing I would counsel on it. But, you know, great stuff. But yeah, I think Commissioner Chair Revol's correct. Yeah, come back in with the coalition. It would be fantastic if you could get that done.
Great. And when you're referencing hospitality, do you mean like Serve Safe? Is that what you're discussing? Like basically people who are, you know, getting certified to handle food properly? Or
I was thinking more of like the server's permit training. Like when you go, there's several accredited, I forget the right term, but like there's several specific vendors that have the online class that you take. It's about 5 hours. When you finish it, you get your, you know, you're in to get your server's permit. Those are all run by independent companies. They used to run, you know, they used to have, you have to go out to the location and somebody would hold them. Now they're mostly virtual, but those are all independent companies that put those on. They're held to standards that OLCC, you know, requires them to be at. And maybe it works better as a contract with the single entity. I don't know that, you know, that would be for
Any
discussion, but.
Any of the questions by commissioners? Thank you very much, Natalie. Appreciate your time.
okay, thank your time.
Thank you, Natalie.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, everyone. And we'll close on that note. There was one other topic we had hoped to touch on, but not especially relevant, especially after we had a great back and forth between Natalie and the commission. So we'll present that other idea and conversation at a different time with other partners. We really appreciate the time this morning, and I believe you have our contact information should you have any other follow-up questions. If not, we'll also be in touch. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Update, Jeff.
Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners. Chair Reval, all the commissioners, Director Prinz, for the record, Jeff Samuels, Administrative Services Division Director with OLCC. Very short today, but just an important update. I know that Director Prinz has hired a new distilled spirits program director, Steve Robbins, and I don't know if you wanted to take a moment to talk about his background and then.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so I think part of the update is we do have a distilled spirits director that will be starting August 1. His name is Steve Robbins. He's accepted that post, that very important post that I think, as Rick Garza explained, in charge of that distilled spirits model from the supplier to the retailer. And Steve starts August 1st. He has a background in both the private and public sector. So in the private sector, he worked in retail. He worked in warehouses and in logistics. So he has that background. And then for the last several years, I think about a decade, maybe a little bit longer, he's been in public service in the state of Oregon. So he also understands relating to and working with the legislature, who ultimately represents the public and the public that we seek to protect and make aware of the issues around our industries. So I'm really thrilled that Steve accepted that employment. Jeff, I feel like, has been carrying forward the new warehouse on his own back in a lot of ways. And Jeff, I really appreciate how you've done that, partnering with DAS, partnering with our owners, agents. There's just a myriad of people that you work with on a project like this. I know that Jeff was actually at a community meeting in Canby this week after hours, meeting with one of our partners there. I think it was the Lutheran church there that has the cemetery that you might be aware is on that parcel. So yeah, the main news is Steve Robbins will be starting August 1. I'll make sure that we work with Laura to get him obviously on the agenda for your next meeting so you can meet him. I know that Chair Reval had a chance to say hi, and Commissioner Miletus was on the interview panels. So that's probably the big news. And then I wanted to thank Jeff for his commitment to keeping this moving forward, and also his commitment to onboarding Steve. Steve's already started some of his onboarding. There's a lot he can do of just reading, learning. I was gonna send him a link to this meeting. I think it's very, very helpful to hear from Mr. Garza. And so Jeff can explain kind of what's next on, really it's onboarding Steve and kind of what the next steps will be with that.
So I and we collectively have been onboarding Steve as he can fit it in his current role that's ending soon. And we're very excited to have him coming on board in August. Additionally, we're going to go to Virginia. We're going to ABC, and we're going to tour their new facility. So Steve's going to go. I'm going to go. I believe Scott Emery and a couple of our DAS partners. We're going to go and visit and learn from them. And they just, as you probably know, they completed their new facility, and I think it was in June of 21. And they have a 40-acre site and a 315,000 square foot new warehouse, concrete tilt. So we'll be able to capture a lot of information from them. They also did a headquarters there on the facility and kind of changed some processes. So that'll be a great experience for us to learn from what they've already just done. And so I think that's really the news that we wanted to tell you about today. So
When will that be
that trip will be happening second week of August.
August, okay.
It's a quick onboard. I want to thank David Jackson, the COO of NABCA, helping Laura and me to set this up quickly. We're going to get Steve out there. What I should have said is I covered what Steve, his role. He currently works for the legislature as a legislative fiscal officer. So he has that good reputation with the legislature as we keep them updated on where we are with this significant project. And then what Steve doesn't have is a distilled spirits background. He's got the retail and the logistics and the warehousing from his private time, and he has that trust with the legislative body and the understanding of how state government works. But part of this is to get him immersed right away in the distilled spirits legal world, the partnerships we have with NABCA. So that's going to be kicking him off fast.
Okay.
He also has a health background, doesn't he?
Yes, he worked, Commissioner, he worked, he's the legislative fiscal officer for the Oregon Health Authority currently. So he has that. And then I met Steve actually, he worked at the Department of Corrections and was in charge of the health services, and then was the chief financial officer for the Department of Corrections. As you probably know, Commissioner, a lot of that relates to making sure that the health requirements of those in custody are met. So Steve has that background too, with working with the health industry, and I think that'll be another area of real strength for him. Thank you.
Good time today.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move forward with a budget update. And we removed the update from Senate Bill 1095 from this agenda until we get further information as to how that's operating. So, having said that, let's talk about our budget.
I think Colin will be online, and you should have a paper in front of you. Colin has got some good information of kind of the legislatively adopted budget, and we'll be doing an update on the annual review of the executive director of financial transactions.
Good morning.
All right. Good morning, Chair of all commissioners. For the record, my name is Colin Nealand. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the agency. Happy Thursday morning to everyone. So what you have in front of you today and what we'll be going over is an overview of our 2023-25 legislatively adopted budget. And then, of course, we also will be going over the annual executive director travel report and other information that's required by our OLCC policy for me to report to you on an annual basis. So I wanted to start, of course, with our legislatively adopted budget update, along with some financial information from the last biennium, which we're in the process of closing right now. And of course, we're still working through the details of everything that came out of the session that just adjourned here at the end of June, but definitely want to go over the highlights with you all today. And so what you have both on your screen and in front of you today is, of course, the first slide is I always like to just mention OLCC's mission, which of course is supporting businesses, public safety, and community livability. And then where the agency budget information can be found on our agency website. We're currently in the process of updating our 23-25 legislatively adopted budget, and we'll have that information available in much more detail at this website, probably in the September to October timeframe. I know that sounds like a long time to have that information be put out in more detail there. But one of the things that we do is agencies go through and put together all the details of what happened during the legislative session. And then we also work with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services, and they review the information as well and go and make sure that agencies have dotted the I's and crossed the T's. And once that review is completed, then we'll be in a place where we can post it on our website. So because that can take a little bit of time, that's why we're targeting, if we can, as early as September, but could be as late as October when we get that information out on our agency website. And the next slide that you have in front of you is, this is really something we discussed a year ago about just how the state budget process never stops. It always continues, and we spoke about how we were putting together our 2023-25 budget, and at the time a year ago we were discussing our agency request budget. Obviously now we've gone back to the top of this circle here. We're at June, July of 2023, where we are beginning to implement our 2023-25 legislatively adopted budget, and we're going to spend the next 8 months really putting all those pieces together. But of course, at the same time, believe it or not, we're going to start working with Interim Director Prinz and the executive team and agency management, our teams, and we're going to start the process of also putting together our 2025-27 agency request budget, which we will be submitting roughly a year from now. So really, this slide just reflects that the budget process is one that never stops and is always in motion. And so just I always think it's helpful for people to see that there is always a lot going on, both in the current biennium and as the agency is always planning for the next biennium to come. This next slide is just some information I wanted to share with you regarding our liquor sales over the last 2 fiscal years from July through June. And so this is information that we're still finalizing for June of 2023. But the information I wanted to share with you here is that we're currently projecting that we're going to end our last biennium with about $1.67 billion in liquor sales. And as you can see, the liquor sales that we are seeing month by month were fairly consistent. Some increases in the second fiscal year from July 2022 through June of 2023. Roughly on average about a 2.4% increase over the prior year. But overall sales were relatively consistent month by month and fiscal year by fiscal year. And overall, where we look like we are ending the last biennium is we're ending over the revenue estimates that were done at the beginning of last biennium during the 2021 legislative session. by about $30 million, but slightly under the last update we had done back in around September of 2022, when we were estimating that revenues might be as high as about 1.7 billion. So kind of right in the middle of where the revenue estimates had been over the course of the biennium. And when this next slide takes a different look at what our liquor sales have been, and what that reflects is that from a not from a dollars perspective, but from a cases sold perspective, what we see again is the monthly activity is fairly consistent between the two fiscal years. And when we look at the total cases in the first fiscal year of the last biennium compared to the cases in the current biennium, almost flat regarding the type of activity that we saw. And so what that indicates for us is that the increase that we were seeing in sales of 2.4% was really coming from either customers choosing what we've called premiumization, so choosing a higher cost products, or from price increases from the manufacturers due to cost of inflation or those types of things. And so, really the revenue increases that we're seeing are coming more from price increases than they are from cases being sold.
I just chime in real quick. I mean, I think that's a really important point to drive home, because it's one of the things as a control state we can control. And we aren't seeing consumption go up, we're seeing revenue go up. So maintaining, the volume of alcohol, but increasing revenue, that's not something that would happen in the private sector. I mean, it's a big feat that this agency has been able to do that. And so I just think that's something that, it was mentioned last year, because we also achieved that last year. And I think it's something that doesn't go recognized enough. So I just wanted to kind of, drive that point home and thank everybody for keeping that trend going.
Absolutely appreciate those comments.
I think this is Chair Revolt, I think what's important is that that was the case we made 4 years ago about having the new warehouse, and that, being able to put out the kind of numbers that we're putting out by case was important. And if we didn't have the warehouse, if that hadn't passed, the amount of millions of dollars that we would lose simply by not being able to serve the clientele was very clear. And so that's why it's so important. I know I seem to harp on it, is that we stay online, stay on task, stay on schedule with the warehouse, because what we will lose because we couldn't do these case sales would be horrendous for the state.
Right, thank you. And then the next slide I wanted to share with all of you was relating to one of the things that our agency, being the third largest revenue generator for the state, that's always something we want to keep our eye on is what does the distribution look like, and how are we trending towards that? And so looking at our last biennium, and of course, biennium reflecting 2 fiscal years, we're looking at a total of 24 months of activity. We will be closing the books on the June 2023 distribution later this month. So right now, this reflects 23 out of 24 months thus far for the last biennium. And this gives you a breakdown of thus far over those 23 months. We have distributed about $621 million, monthly average of about $27 million. And of course, you see the breakdown there where cities actually have 2 different amounts they receive by statutory amount requirement, 20%, and then a revenue sharing component as well that makes up an additional 14%. So you can see about 113 million and 79 million between those 2 amounts for cities. Counties receive 10%, and so they're at just under 57 million. And then the state general fund at 56% is another 316 million. And then these last 3 items are things that are driven not by the percentage. They're actually a separate call out Of course, the state general fund surcharge is the 50 cents per bottle. And so through 23 months, we see that's at $37 million for the state general fund. And then you can see mental health and drug services and the Oregon Wine Board as well, shown here. So right now, we're trending for last biennium, probably in the range of distributing a total of $640 to $650 million in total. And again, it'll be broken out largely by the percentages that you see there, as well as the amounts for the surcharge and mental health and drug services and OWB. But I wanted to share that information with you because I think that's one of the things in addition to looking at total sales, also being able to look at and have an idea of how much of those sales translate to revenues for the state general fund, cities, counties, and the other things that you see here.
And those are all statutorily determined, correct? That's not something, because we get asked that, and that those are in statute. So if people want to see those numbers differently allocated, that's something they would need to change at the legislature, correct?
Yes, Commissioner Miletus, that is exactly correct.
Yeah, perfect. You just wanted to drive that one home too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then wanted to share with you what we are projecting in revenues for the next biennium. What we were just looking at was in detail was essentially the light blue part of this pie chart, which makes up over 90% of the revenues the agency generates, which is our distilled spirits. And so obviously we were just looking at those amounts of, just a little under 1.7 billion for the last biennium, projecting about 1.95 billion for the next biennium. And then of course the other revenue sources that the agency has as well over there to the side. But obviously the main revenue source is distilled spirits. One thing we are continuing to monitor is going from about 1.7 billion, just under that, to about 1.95 billion, reflects roughly a 16 to 17% increase. That's something that I've been working with my financial services team and my former budget manager, who's no longer with the agency, is just to take a look at our models, because 16 to 17% growth is fairly robust, and wanting to continue to keep an eye on that. And especially as we kind of take a look at the revenue information that we were just looking at on the previous slides. And that's something that we'll continue to monitor because historical averages have been closer to about 10% biennium, but there have been bienniums where the increase from one to the next has been in that range of about 17%. And of course, we're in a unique environment right now between inflation and whether the economy will have a soft landing or other aspects, and just overall economic activity within Oregon. And so this is something that we'll continue to evaluate and update on a quarterly basis as we continue to go through and look to see are we trending towards this $1.95 billion estimate, or do we see the revenue estimates there need to go up or down as we learn more as we go through the biennium?
I mentioned one thing on this one too, is I've gotten comments on this chart, and it's good because it's our revenues, but I think people will look at it and see how large the pie is. Those are all very different sources of revenue. I mean, there's one's from a tax, one's from a license fee, or tax or on other stuff. And, the distilled spirits is essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I mean, it's basically the wholesale markup plus the retail markup minus the 7% or so from the agent. So they're all very different. So they're not comparing apples to apples. They're comparing the different revenue sources. Is that probably not saying that very articulately, but I think people get a misperception sometimes when they look at that chart.
Yes, I think this is the one that we have to be careful, to your point, Commissioner Miletus, not to try and draw an apples to apples comparison, because each of these revenue estimates are driven by the specific statutory guidelines and requirements that are set up around how distilled spirit revenues are handled compared to the privilege tax on beer and wine and everything else that you see here on this slide. And so, yes, I think in total, it reflects the estimated revenue for the agency, but it's not meant to mean that the way the revenue is generated is exactly the same. And that's, to your point, based on the way the statute is set up around how these things work.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Of course. So then just wanted to go over, after kind of laying out what we were looking at from revenue activity from our distilled spirits from the last biennium and what we're projecting for the next, wanted to also share with you, and this is a tentative update because we're still working through the details, and my apologies, I know this is a lot of detail on this particular slide, but I did want to go over the legislatively adopted budget summary with you so that you could see that the top number here, current service level, that essentially is, in budget terms, was our base budget plus budgeted inflation that we had to carry forward the programs that were in existence from last biennium into the next biennium. And of course, the one exception to that is our capital projects related to our warehouse and also our conveyor project, because those items that were approved during the 2021 and then again with the updated amounts during the 2022 legislative session, those were approved with 6-year spending authority. And so those amounts are not reflected in what you see on this slide. Those are separate. And the spending authority we have actually goes back to the 2021-23 legislatively approved budget. And so what you really see here is the continuation of our core agency programs without those capital projects that have been separately approved and therefore did not need to be approved again. One thing that we'll talk about near the bottom of the slide, the one exception to that has been our IT modernization capital project. And I'll discuss that in more detail when we get to that about why you see that one near the bottom of this slide, but you don't see our warehouse or conveyor projects. And so what you see here is that in total, our other funds limitation or spending authority is about $342 million. 384 positions and 382 FTE is where we started off the discussion with the governor's office and the legislature. And then each of these POP numbers, POP, of course, is an acronym for Policy Option Package, which is essentially a funding decision from a policy perspective between the governor's office and the legislature. And what you can see is we had about a $19.7 million increase related to bank card costs and transaction fees that we're anticipating. And this was a carry forward from what had been approved by the legislature back during the 2022 emergency board, where they had approved an increase in our last biennium. And then this is really carrying forward that increase into the next biennium as well. And then our policy option package 102, these are $7.5 million of warehouse and non-bonded IT costs. These are all things related to getting ready for the warehouse move to Canby, as well as our IT modernization project that we're working on, things that aren't necessarily eligible or were originally scoped within the bonds. So a big amount of this is the equipment that we are looking to purchase and put in the new warehouse, whether those are forklifts or pickers or things of that nature, as well as the various IT projects, the ongoing maintenance and things that we have related to the different modernization efforts that are currently ongoing. So really, policy option package 102, the greatest takeaway I would share with you there is it really emphasized the support that we had from the legislature and ultimately from the governor's office as well to continue moving forward on the new warehouse and the conveyor and in our IT modernization project, really a continuation of the things that had been approved earlier on in the 2021 and 22 sessions. And as the legislature had a chance to take a look at these things and continue to see the work that the agency has done with all of you in moving these projects forward and the business case for doing so, approving the things we needed to keep moving these projects forward, not just with what had been previously approved in the bonded amounts, but also in the non-bonded items that we'll need for those projects. And then package 305 is a vehicle replacement specifically for our marijuana programs for $385,000. We also have our cannabis communication outreach for the amount you can see there. And then going down, I won't of course read all of these off to you. One thing to note is policy option package 418 is our partnership that was approved during the session to establish a state cannabis lab with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And so we'll be planning to transfer $2.3 million of our marijuana revenues over to the Oregon Department of Agriculture as part of that effort. We had various position reclassifications, including establishing one deputy director position instead of the two that we had previously had in the agency. And so that reflects that effort there. And then we also, when the co-chair's budget was released, one of the things that the legislature was working through was they were looking to have reductions made to the agency in order to increase the amount of revenues that pass through to the state general fund, cities and counties, and the things that we looked at regarding the distribution earlier on. And so we had 12 vacant positions. 5 of those were in administrative and agency support areas, and another 7 were in public safety. So almost about $3 million in reductions that occurred there. And then that reflected in total about a $367.6 million budget that was recommended by the Ways and Means Subcommittee back in early May, and then moved forward to be approved by the full Ways and Means Committee in May. And then, of course, kind of sat there during all the things that were happening during the legislative session in the latter part of May and first part of June. And then when the legislature was able to really begin business again in the latter part of June, these other items that moved through were House Bill 2013, which is the direct-to-retailer legislation that was happening related to the ability to head off a potential lawsuit that was out there. And the $175,000 that you see there is to make software adjustments to our Oregon Privileged Tax Online system, our Opto project that we're currently working with the vendor on. And that, of course, impacts our privileged tax filers. And then another big item was the home delivery policy option package in House Bill 3308. So that gave us about $967,000 in spending authority and established 6 positions. The reason the FTE shows 4.5 is because those positions will be phasing in on October 1st of 2023. And that's intentional. It's intended to give us the first 3 months of this biennium, so July, August, and September, to get our recruitments posted, go through the hiring process, with the goal of having those new positions filled as close to October 1st as possible. And then in the next biennium in 2025-27, those FTE will roll up to being 6 full FTE and match the position authority that we have there. And then, of course, there were some adjustments related to the DAS assessments, and that's really just means that we're going to be paying DAS and DOJ a little bit less because their rates were decreased. And then the most significant thing we wanted to talk about here just below is policy option package 101. And this is the third leg of the stool for our capital projects. This is the continuation of our IT modernization project that was approved at $27 million during the 2021 and 22 legislative sessions. This $16.5 million this is where this project is different than our warehouse and conveyor. The warehouse and conveyor, again, those were approved as 6-year projects, so the funding did not need to be reauthorized. The IT project, and it gets into technical budget issues, but because it was an IT project specifically, they had only approved it for 2 years with the understanding that we would come back and ask to continue the spending authority forward for what was not spent during the 21-23 biennium. And so that's what you see here is the ability to continue that spending authority into this current biennium that we are in now. and continue to move that forward. And we'll continue updating this number. And if there's any adjustments, which we think there will be, we'll work with the governor's office and the legislature to make sure that we continue to have all of the $27 million that was originally approved available to us to complete that IT modernization effort. And then lastly, what you see here is also we have bond issuance costs, but then in Policy Option Package 303, which came out of the end of session bill and Senate Bill 5506, we were really glad to see that 2 of the IT positions that we had originally requested in our agency request budget ended up being approved during the legislative session. So we had 2 IT positions be added to our base budget, which is the last item you see here. And so in total, and apologize for the long explanation here, you can see that our tentative legislatively adopted budget is about $386 million and about 384 positions. And of course, something to call out is when we look at the top of this slide, we can see that we started with 384 positions. And yes, we did lose 12 positions, but we also gained 12 positions. So coincidentally, we ended up with the same number of authorized positions that we started the budget conversations with, although those are in different areas. And the last thing I would note is that the bottom line total that you see here of 386 million, this does not include the costs that will come out of bargaining related to cost of living adjustments or step increases. Those items, because they are finalized after the legislative session adjourns, what happens is the Department of Administrative Services Labor Relations Program area work with agencies to lead the bargaining with AFSCME and other groups. For OLCC specifically, it's AFSCME. And they go through bargaining. You may have seen in the news that the state has tentatively reached an agreement with AFSCME for a 6.5% cost of living adjustment to take effect in this next year, and then another cost of living adjustment of 6.55% to take effect. It'll depend on ultimately what happens during the legislative session on the exact timing, but in early 2025. And so in addition to step increases and cost of living adjustments, we are anticipating, like always happens, that the Department of Administrative Services will go before the legislature during the short annual session starting in February 2024. They'll provide a report based on what they estimate the increase in other funds limitation agencies like ours would need related to the cost of what was bargained. And then our budget that you see here will be increased related to that report. So this number will be updated, and I'll provide that update once all of that is finalized about 8 months from now. But that is something I want to just highlight for everyone, is that when you're looking at the news and hear the what is being bargained and tentatively agreed to with AFSCME and other groups, that is not reflected here yet, but as part of the standard state budget process, it will be just later on during the biennium. So I know that's a lot, and I'll stop there for a second and see if anyone has any questions thus far. Okay.
Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd here. Hi, Colin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Just a call out on item number 802, the abolishment of the 12 vacant positions. I know what specifically are those positions? Can you tell me what those are? Admin, agency support, public safety?
Sure. And we can provide more detail on this, but roughly what those 12 positions were, 5 were in admin and agency support. And in admin and agency support, 2 of those were in financial services. 1 was a payroll position that will be abolished, but the agency, going back to actually a plan that had been originally approved during the 2021 legislative session, for the agency to transfer our payroll function over to Department of Administrative Services. there was some, basically that was approved in our budget for last biennium, but it fell through the cracks on the Department of Administrative Services side. So the plan has been instead to implement that in October of this biennium. So we lost the payroll position that we had within financial services, but we're transferring that function over to DAS, and we have received the other funds limitation to pay DAS for those services. And ultimately that'll be a benefit to the agency because historically we've had one person that has done the payroll function, and that's just an area of fairly high risk when you only have one person that's processing payroll on a daily basis for an agency. And so even though we hate to lose the position, it is an improvement from a risk perspective to have that function transferred over to DAS where they have more capacity to handle vacancies when they incur and things like that. We also lost an accounting technician position in our privilege tax audit area. In our PACE program, we lost one of our policy analysts that had been formerly filled by Scott Larson. And Scott did a lot of the revenue estimating for us. And so right now, Peter Nordic in our PACE program has really picked up that work. And I'll be working with Peter to get more into the details of that revenue forecasting that he is doing and to try and develop some bench strength for the agency in that area. We lost one of our 3 authorized bottle positions out of PACE. So now we're 2 out of financial services, 2 out of PACE. And then the 5th administrative position was one of our supply specialists that were in the administrative services division that Jeff Samuels oversees. And then when we transitioned over to public safety, we had a couple of our regulatory specialist positions that were abolished. We had a policy analyst that had been our lone position focused on human trafficking. So that vacant position was abolished. We lost some of our administrative positions in public safety that will impact those things. And I'll send out the detail, but in general, that gives you or hopefully provide some information around what were those positions that we lost. And the focus, of course, in those positions is they were focused on positions that were either entirely funded through our liquor fund revenue stream or in part funded through our liquor fund revenue stream. So positions that were entirely funded by our marijuana revenues were not part of that discussion because ultimately savings on the marijuana side don't immediately translate over to a higher distribution to the state general fund. And so the decision points that the legislature was looking at were all focused on positions that were either entirely or partially funded by alcohol revenues.
Okay, so when you see that 2.9, is that purely wages?
It's wages and operating expenses that we would typically see related to those positions, but it's primarily wages.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioners? Thank you.
My pleasure. And so then these next couple of slides I'll go through a little faster. This is just an overview of our FTE, and the printout you have in front of you, I believe, had a typo where I had included a future biennium of 25-27. We'll send out a correction to that because obviously we're not there yet. But what you basically see here is that the growth in FTE between last biennium and the current 23-25 biennium, as we saw on the previous slide, is essentially flat. That's true as well for kind of the bottom part of the bar chart that you see here around support services FTE is that, really fairly static, overall FTE authority in the agency between our programs between last biennium and the current biennium. Definitely some changes like we were just discussing, but overall, not huge changes that we're seeing as we kind of seen from prior biennia. And then this is just another way to look at this in a little more detail, more of a divisional look so that you can again get a sense of those 384 authorized positions and related FTE. What does that look like by division as we look at the last three biennia going from the 2019-21 legislatively approved budget over to our 2023-25 legislatively adopted budget. And then the last item I wanted to share with all of you today is just to make sure that I'm providing the annual executive director financial transactions report. And so that should be the separate handout that you have today. And that's broken down into 4 areas between time reporting, vacation payoffs, or payouts, I should say, and travel expenses. And then, of course, the spots, which is essentially the credit card program that the agency has as authorized throughout the state enterprise. And the real takeaway from this information, as well as the detail that you see on the travel related on the second page of that printout that you have, is there was nothing of any significance that was noted between former director Steve Marks and current interim director Craig Prinz. Everything that we were seeing in these 4 categories was appropriately reviewed, and everything was handled appropriately in each of these 4 areas. So nothing of significance to report for the last fiscal year. And that concludes my remarks. Happy to answer any questions.
No?
I'll just say I'll forward people that have questions about the agency to this YouTube especially, because it's kind of laid out how much revenue is made, how much goes back to the state, and also Rick Garza's presentation, and kind of sums up why this is all so important. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Colin.
Dennis? All right. Thank you very much.
My
Now,
pleasure.
let's take Alan. Welcome.
Hello, and good morning, Chair Revolt and members of the commission. For the record, my name is Alan Rowe. I am currently filling the role of distribution and purchasing director, recently vacated by Nikki Leslie. I worked for the commission for nearly 16 years and spent that time as a manager in the warehouse. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce myself to the commission and give an update on some changes and occurrences that have happened over the last month. Mark Avent has filled the position of purchasing coordinator, vacated by Melissa Spaeth upon her retirement. Mark is currently responsible for ordering and pricing. Mark has worked for the commission for 21 years and previously worked for me in the warehouse as well. We completed our annual inventory and would like to thank IT, financial services, and the warehouse staff for their efforts in the almost 11,000 counts in over 9,000 locations between the 2 warehouses. Last week, we conducted the quarterly listing meeting where new products are presented for selection with the OLCC. We're currently in the process of sending out the holiday survey. The holiday survey is a cooperative interaction with our licensees to prepare for the allocation of the holiday products that they would like to carry in their stores. Mark and I remain focused on maintaining, listing, ordering, pricing, and making sure that we're able to continue the flow of alcohol movement through the warehouse and out to our licensees. I would also like to note that we've received nothing but positive feedback and support from all of our stakeholders. So, but I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about an event that occurred last week, actually 2 weeks ago. Right after the 4th of July, we experienced a fairly major technical difficulty, we'll say, with our order system that prevented us from receiving the orders from the stores. Our IT department worked very diligently on that, but what it did was it caused us to lose a day of shipping. We were already behind a day of shipping because we were closed on the 4th of July. So the decision was made, rather than to lose any shipping or to cancel any orders, to work 2 Saturdays in a row So in 2 weeks' time, we'd be back on regular schedule. The first Saturday went fine. The second Saturday, we experienced a massive amount of absenteeism. And I would like to publicly give a shout out to the 11 employees that did show up just last Saturday and helped us get over 10,000 cases out the door.
Wow.
It was a struggle, but we have a very dedicated crew. We all put together and got it done.
And Alan, how many generally are in that warehouse?
That particular Saturday, we had 37 employees slated to work that day.
And 11 showed up.
And 11 showed up.
Would it be
12,
appropriate?
including
to-
myself. What's that?
Would it be appropriate to provide a list of those 11?
I actually have a list of those 11. If you would like to hear them, or I can provide it to you later.
No, leave them.
You bet.
Yeah.
Paul Herbert, Paul Herbert was scheduler. Worker twos were Chris Osborne, Nathaniel Mayer, Chandler Cole, Mark Saylor. Equipment operators, David Hainline, Ron Huseman, and Alfredo Ramirez. Worker ones, Allison Paulin. And 2 temps, Jody Hunt and, Gentry Boaz. And myself.
Send me a list.
So with
Send me a list.
all of those people, we got the work of 40 out the door.
Amazing. Thank you.
It was amazing. I cannot thank that crew enough. And was highly impressed with their attitudes the entire day in 90-degree weather, mind you.
Please relay our gratitude
Absolutely will.
above and beyond.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's see, the warehouse shipped 363,743 cases just last June. That's a 2.63 increase over 22. A little bit of sales reports here. Sales of distilled spirits were 72.5 million for June of 23, and that's up from the prior year. June sales finished with a 1.03 increase or 2.4 million above 22. Licensee sales finished about even with the prior year. Licensee sales accounted for 16.2 million in sales, reflecting an approximate 73,000 increase from the prior year. Consumer sales in June were 56.2 million, up 4.4%. Total sales for the rolling 12-month period ending June 23 have increased 2.4% or $20.1 million same period from the prior year. With that, I appreciate the time to meet the commissioners and the chair formally. I've met a couple of you informally, but I look forward to future meetings and presenting future reports on sales and operations moving forward, and let you know I have a very committed crew and a very good group of employees and staff that have risen to the challenge of the most recent changes, staffing wise and operational wise.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Thank
Thanks
you.
for everything. It's a tough job.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
Yes.
this is Commissioner Doherty here. Sorry, Chair. How many employees did not show up on that Saturday?
We had a total of 24 call outs and 2 went home early. They got sick within the first 2 hours.
So this is a mandatory day for them and they just didn't show up?
It was a combination of volunteers and mandated overtime.
Okay. And what's our general recourse for this, or how do we deal with a situation like that?
Recourse is a little bit difficult, because as you know, we can't take sick leave from them for a Saturday. It's an overtime situation. So there's not really discipline to be done, other than, expressing our disappointments with those who all out or went home early, I guess. And I wouldn't want to or couldn't speak on the reasons people called out. I have no real reasons, knowledge of true family emergencies, actual illnesses, or how many just thought it was too sunny outside to come to work.
Sure.
All right, well, thank you. And again, give our thanks to those employees that did show up. That was monumental work.
And we thank you for your recognition.
So before we do anything else, the young guy need to have come up to the table. Now, young guy, skinny. Nathan,
Well, I know you're not talking about me now.
young guy.
Skinny.
So what's going on?
Chair Wall, members of the commission, Nathan Ricks, Deputy Director of Strategy and Policy. I wanted to let you all know that I'm going to be moving on from the agency. I've accepted the position with Deloitte's U.S. advisory practice focused on government services. And it's been a tremendous almost 11 years in state service. And I believe just over 5 of those here with the OLCC, first with the marijuana program, and then through COVID with you all and through all of the different changes. So thank you for the opportunity to serve, and I'll carry this experience with me into the future and hope to stay connected to all of you all.
Commissioners? Yes?
No.
Nathan,
Sure,
thank you. Thank you for your service and the tremendous work that I was quite proud of during the COVID pandemic and the relief and that we offered industry, and to work closely with you on that. You did a tremendous job on that, and just want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, same. I mean, it's, COVID was tough, but we've all been through a lot. We've all worked through a lot. And I think everybody that's served this agency deserves a lot, because, like we saw today, there's just a lot that goes on here that doesn't get recognized. And Nathan's been front line of that a lot of years. I mean, he's a guy I call a lot on just general stuff, because you were, you're always there. And yeah, I think I don't know exactly what you'll be doing at Deloitte, but in some sense, I mean, one of our former chairs went on to work with Deloitte and help kind of set things up nationwide in a sense with begin with. So it's sort of like the experiences that came out of this agency, going to an outfit like that, it's going to serve you well. And in a sense, it'll serve the state well, because we're still building this thing nationally. And that network is strong. And so we all stay in touch. I mean, and so I'll stay in touch, and yeah, if you ever need anything, you got me, and you got everyone up here, and thank you for everything, getting us through this budget. It's been a lot of work, and we're still gonna keep chugging along, but thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Commissioner Doherty?
Thank you very much, Nathan. My short time here, it's been a pleasure to know you. I didn't get as close to you as I would like to, but the work you've done and the reputation you have around here certainly benefit this organization in the state. So thanks for your efforts.
Thank you.
Nathan, I wanted to say something too. I think I want to thank you personally. When I came on board, Nathan and Colin were ready to present the budget in the middle of a storm. And I am thankful for him stepping into that. Everything has a season, right? We've all learned this the last few months, and change is a part of life. We've all learned that. And Nathan has a spirit of adventure. I don't know if you all know that. He's a young father. He's a pilot. Just got back from Europe doing a tour there. And I think that spirit of adventure, what I told Nathan is, I think going to a firm like Deloitte, my goodness, there's no downside. I had a similar experience leaving state service probably a decade ago. And you can always come back from a place like Deloitte because it has such an excellent reputation. And I just want to thank you personally, and then I want to give the folks here in person, and then we have a lot of staff. We have kind of a tradition of doing let's give Nathan a hand. And we wish you well. And thank you very much for your service. Nathan.
You.
Now, personally, this is how you look when you can handle stress. This is how you look when you can't. So take this as an example of how you do it right.
Understood.
Good luck,
Thank you.
buddy.
Thank you. The
Thank you.
bench is strong here, and there's a lot of folks that from the PACE team that are willing to step up, and look forward to rooting from you all, with you all from the sidelines next few years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commission and Executive Director Prince to return.
Okay, so we're going to talk about retail services as it relates to Vanita Store 1190.
Morning,
Good morning.
Chair and Commissioners. I'm Paul Rosenho, Interim Director of Retail Services. And before you today, I have 4 applicants for Vanita Store 1190, which is up for appointment due to a resignation. The 4 applicants come from a pool of initial 7 that we screened down to 4. So without further ado, we'll start with Aaron Sandall. And I do have printed copies of the presentation for you if you'd like.
And Vanita, that's just outside of
Eugene.
Eugene, right? Okay.
I know the big city people don't know about that. But Eugene, we got a lot of cities around Eugene.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Do you want to start? 5 to 6 minutes. And do we have an official timekeeper?
Official timekeeper.
Oh, I'm too nice. Okay. I will, let's see, we'll be allotting 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 minutes. And I'll give you, how about a good 30 seconds? You want a minute or 30 seconds? Just prior to time up.
30 seconds.
30 seconds,
Yeah.
good with you? You got it.
Thank you. Or are you gonna put the slides up there too, or are you just gonna?
I can do that.
Okay.
I've got like too many things happening. Sorry.
There we go.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Aaron Sandal, the Operation Directors for C&K Market, and I oversee the operation for Ray's Food Place in Vanita. And I have with me today Jessica Esselburn. She is the acting store manager. Next slide, please. I'm speaking to you today about not only taking over the operation of the Vanita liquor store, but also moving it into the Ray's Ray's grocery store in the same shopping center. Next slide, please.
I'm just gonna, I gotta share the screen. I did it wrong. So keep going. I'll catch up.
Okay.
Sorry.
So C&K Market, we're an independent grocery retailer based out of Metro, Oregon. We have 38 locations in Oregon and Northern California. We operate Ray's Food Places, Shop Sparks, C&K Market, and the 4 OLCC expansion stores in Sisters, Gold Hill, Selma, and Merlin. And we became an employee-owned grocery store in 2020 through an employee stock ownership program. Next slide, please. Vanita Liquor has been an asset to the community since opening in a destination stop headed to the Oregon coast and for the local community. Currently employing 3 employees and the owner operator. Ray's has been part of the community since 1988. We currently employ 14 full-time employees and 12 part-time employees. We pride ourselves on being part of the community, offering our customers the best service and products whenever possible. We are known for a large selection, getting the customers the items they want. We see adding liquor to the store as a added endeavor for giving customers that convenience. Next slide, please. Our store leadership starts with me. I've been with C&K Markets for 31 years, managing multiple store locations. I started as a bag boy and worked my way up to the current role I'm at now. I'm versed in customer service, P&L, cash and inventory management, and merchandising. I'm the licensee on file for our OLCC expansion stores, and all of those stores have shown positive growth over the years. Jessica is the acting store manager. She's been with C&K Markets for 24 years. She is local to the Vanita community for the last 20 years. She has great customer service skills, great with team members. P&L management is very versed there. handles the in-store donation budget, and cash inventory management and merchandising. We have a district manager that'll be in the store multiple times throughout a month to make sure that operations are sound. And then we'll be hiring a full-time liquor store manager that'll be responsible for the day-to-day operations, focused on customer service, building sales, cleanliness, merchandising, scheduling, and our team leadership. We have multiple employees inside the store. They're currently excited for the opportunity to apply for that role. Next slide, please. Offering liquor in the Rays will advance convenience to the public. We currently serve 7,000 customers a week, and they're looking for a true one-stop shop for their grocery needs. We project increasing the sales to 2.1 million, which is a 10% increase over prior year. This is attainable through relocating inside the grocery store, expanded hours, added variety, and great customer service. We'll be offering spirits for sale from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m., 364 days a year. The location inside of Rays will offer greater linear feet than the current liquor store, with room to expand as demand increases. After the building is complete, we will lower the OLC district manager to increase selection inside the location. Next slide, please. To prevent theft within the department or within the store, the liquor store, it'll be located in clear view, so everyone's actually able to see the department, the people inside of it at all times. We'll be staffing with clerks that are engaging with customers and their great customer service. Cashiers and clerks are trained at time of hire, what to look for when it comes to theft, and how to properly sell alcohol. And they go through training quarterly on refresher to prevent sales from minor. We'll be using a DVR system and cameras to monitor the system. And the department will go through regular cycle counts to help with inventory and theft control. Next slide, please. This is what the storefront will look like. You have the Rays Food Place banner, and we'll move over the liquor sign that's currently there to reuse that sign. Next slide, please. So this is the planned layout of the overview of the location. This is the current grocery store layout, and then over here with the arrow pointing to it, you see what the liquor store will look like inside of the location. Next slide, please. And this is similar to the actual layout of the store, which will be similar to my sister's location, just with a expanded entrance. So you've got expanded department size. There'll be one entrance into the building next to the cash register, or next to the store, next to the cash registers in clear view, so everyone can see who's going in and out of the store. It'll be staffed at all times. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the department. We keep the center of the department with only 4 shelves in height with islands. The perimeter walls are a little bit taller. The outlining of the store, you can see into it, so you can see who's in there and what shopping looks like if there's more customers, or and just be able to nice, clean, clear view. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of the shelving along the back wall. So you got 22-inch shelves all in black to highlight the product and let it stand out. As you can see here, the product stands out. You're not seeing a bunch of shelving. Next slide, please. This is what the register counter would look like. We would have 2 registers in this building. We would have mini bottles and like the smaller bottles locked in cabinets behind the register to prevent someone easily being able to pocket those. And then high-end spirits also locked up behind the registers as well. And then in the department, we would have promotional areas at the end caps to highlight on local product, and wood barrels for like promotional merchandising. Next slide, please. We like to highlight a lot of our product with like local and call outs for particular brands, if it's tequila or vodka. So it's clearly visible for the customer what they're looking for.
30 seconds.
Okay, next slide, please. This is what the interior, the signage we'll use. We like to highlight the actual product itself and highlight local items in the area. Like this is Fern Ridge, so that'd be part of the decor. Next slide, please. So in summary, we think this would be an ideal location to move to. It'd be convenient for shoppers that are looking for one true stop shop. We'd offer longer hours. We would have added revenue to the financial, or to the store and to the OLCC and Rays. We've been successful in our other 4 locations in serving the community. And CK Market would operate the immediate liquor store. New location would operate currently in its current location until we move it to the next location. And then the rest of it's just information for what's around the building and stuff like that for you guys. That's it.
Commissioners, questions?
7 minutes just passed.
Yeah. I'd give you 8, but you know.
Chairman?
Yes, Dennis.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate your presentation. I like your store in Sisters. That's my favorite stop there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, how many stores do you have like this that are liquor store inside your markets?
We have 4.
I'm sorry?
So, we have 4 of them. We have Sisters, Merlin, Gold Hill, and Selma.
Great, thank you. And how many stores do you have total?
38, and 26 in Oregon.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Very nice presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks again.
Okay.
Never give you 8.
You think I've done this enough times, you think I'd be able to get through it faster. But
You did a good job. Very good job.
Any other questions?
No.
All right. Thank you very much.
Chair and Commissioners, next we're going to call up Thomas Heyman.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Thomas. I'm going to give you 7 minutes. If we interrupt you for whatever reason, I make sure to hold
I
that.
probably won't need 7.
Okay.
Such a state name for the record.
My name is Thomas Hammond.
Better know when you want to advance the slides. Or better know when you want to advance the slides.
Oh, sure. Well, we can advance that right now. These are my sons, Jamie and Eric. Jamie on the right, Eric on the left. Jamie's my current manager. Eric's going to be the manager, and he also works part-time for me. I'm the little one in the middle. I've been the agent at 1195. Next slide, please. Oh, at 1195 for the last 23 years. We do $6.4 million annually in 2022. And I also have Jamie's wife, one of my grandsons, 2 of my granddaughters, all working for me. So I have kind of my own little workforce. Before that, we have owned 2 convenience stores for a total of 12, 13 years. My wife and I built those up. Sorry, my late wife and I built those. I did run or work at agency 1169 on division before I was asked by the OLCC to move to Lincoln City and run that one while you looked for a permanent agent. I didn't want to live on the coast, so I did not apply for it. The current store, let's try the next one, I think. Yeah, this store, this is my store, and we have like a total of almost 7,000 square feet. 4,000 that's retail, 3,000 warehouse. So I can put up kind of anything I want to put up. The displays are huge. I carry a full line of products. The store in Veneta is about 2,200 square feet. The location would stay the same. I've already talked to the landlord. The lease is assumable. Should be no problems there. The shopping center is very nice. It's got good foot traffic. The exterior of the building's in excellent shape. Category signs on the inside are easy to read. Front counter is very good shape, but for safety reasons, I think next slide. Oh, where'd we go here? Maybe one more. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it. There's a step up behind the counter, and I'm not sure exactly what it's covering up except wires. And I'd like to eliminate that. They've got caution tape on and everything, but I don't like that. So I would eliminate that. At the time, I would probably put in a new security system, a 12 camera system, new cash registers, the motion detector and security system monitored by Apex Security, and install an ID checking machine for underage sales and fake IDs. The camera system would also cover the outside, which they have no camera system there now. They've got
a camera system, but only 4 or 5 of the cameras are working. So we put in a 12 camera system. The store I have right now has 26 cameras. I can see pretty much anything inside and out that I have to see. And it really helps a lot. Inventory that I noticed out there, there's a lot of duplicates. I was able to get what I call an aging report, which shows bottles that have had no sales on them for the last year. They had like 31 items. I believe in my store, I've got 6. This is just a matter of rotating your stock, getting the new products in. There's lots of room for new products out there, plus maybe an Oregon section only. That, and I know a lot of them will whine about, well, it's produced in Oregon. No, it isn't. It's bottled in Oregon, but it's not produced in Oregon. So we'd have to take a little bit of time on that one. And the back room needs to be reworked to where you can leave items in the cases. Right now, they unload all the cases, very, very labor intensive. And it's very hard for the auditors to come in and audit the system or find the inventory. So I would take out some of the racks in there, and make sure that I can stack product. You know, if you have more than 4 cases, you might as well have a stack. The funding for this would come from the Hammond Family Trust account. We've earmarked $250,000 to cover all the expenses for 2 months and whatever security and cameras and everything we need to do, plus the counter work. But other than that, the inside of the store, the floor is good, the lighting's good. The landlord, the only thing he said about the camera system, if you put them outside, do it discreetly. As far as I can tell, there's no cameras out there looking at any of the parking lot. There would be at least 2 that would cover the parking lot, cuts down on underage, shoulder tapping and everything out there. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners.
Where's the boys? Where's the?
Right back there.
Is that Kyle?
That's Eric.
Eric.
Yeah. The other son is at the store. It's freight day.
It's what?
He had to stay, which is where I'm going when I get down here.
Gotcha.
I'm back to work. So it's, I've got 2 of them. And then, like I said, I've got all kinds of kids, grandkids. My other granddaughter, she'd probably like to work for me, but she's got 3 of my great grandbabies to take care of right now. So she's out of the picture until they get a little bit older.
So
but I can put her to work.
For you city people, Veneta and Sisters are very great locations to come in and out of that facility. And the first time I walked in your facility, I went, wow. So it was a wilder. And this location is fantastic. This is where you go through to go to the coast from my part of the state. And when you go past that area, it's like, wow, even Welser. So it's a great location.
It's got the good signage you can see from the
road
126 going by.
Yeah.
And there's a sign out near the road too, but it's not real big, but you can definitely see it. And there's at least 2 fast food places there in the parking lot that people have to stop and they can see the liquor sign and everything.
And state
Plus,
and county keeps the traffic slower, so you can see the stores, both the organizations, because you have to slow down.
Yeah.
I've got to mention that Eric's in-laws live in Veneta, and his wife graduated from Veneta or Elmira High School. So he's got a lot of contacts out there too. And with ours at Springfield, we do about 5.2 million over the counter, another million in liquor sale or in licensee sales. So it's more of a blue collar. I mean, we're, I think, the largest casage store in that whole area, Eugene, Springfield, and surrounding, because we do have a lot of blue collar. And our licensee tentacles reach all the way to Junction City, Harrisburg, West Eugene, Marcola, and since the Blue River one burnt down, Melanie, the agent up there, has sent her licensees to us. because we're friends. So when that gets rebuilt, I'll probably lose those, but that's okay. There's always somebody else opening up a.
Your liquor store, 1195, correct?
Yes.
That's in Springfield?
Springfield West.
And Springfield to Veneta is what, how many? 10 miles?
15.
15 miles?
Yeah, probably 15 from where I'm at.
Okay, and you've got enough manpower, it sounds like. To be
Yeah,
able to-
there's one full-time, or at least one full-time employee out there now. But the people that are leaving it are using their people from their other store, which is the Red Apple, and it's a grocery store. They were moving their people out there and running the store. So like on the weekends, it would be people from their grocery store going out there and working. And I think that's what they found was real labor intensive, is trying to get their people to go out there and work for one day. We'll find somebody that likes to live out there,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Commissioners? Dennis? Thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you.
Chair Commissioners, we're going to hear from Matthew Crosland next.
Welcome.
Commissioners, thanks for having me.
Good morning, Matthew. I'm gonna give you 7 minutes.
You want me to set my watch?
I know. Got it. I'll give you 30 seconds, warning.
Okay, yeah.
If we interrupt you again, same spiel. If we interrupt you at all.
Yeah,
make sure
absolutely.
you Pause.
For sure. Matthew Crosland. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, go for it. Let's fire off. Matthew Crosland, grew up in Northeast Portland. Worked for Costco for 12 years. Started a construction company after that, started remodeling houses, doing ADUs. In 2020, my wife and I started a delivery company. We've since become the largest private contractor for Amazon in the Northwest. Started with five employees, 2 vans. We have 110 vans. Last year at the Christmas party, 197 employees. So scaling is what we do. You guys all probably received a package from us. I'm sure a few. We cover most of the Portland metro area, anywhere from Salem to Battleground. That's us. So, okay, now you guys know I am. Okay, location in Veneta's beautiful store. I mean, interior is great. Recently remodeled. Exterior is nice and clean. We're going to pretty much keep everything the same as far as hours operation. Next slide. I've seen this like 10 times, right? All right. So our business plan really is to keep the store mostly the same with a few changes. And so we'll just keep going because we're going for time here. So, okay, new floor plan. So the back space isn't allocated correctly, in my opinion. There's a huge desk that's just full of old paperwork and not being used. You can't sell stuff from behind a wall. So our plan is to move the wall in Veneta back 10 feet. Increase the floor space by 360 square feet. You go to the next slide for me. Add a third island across the back wall there. We're going to put in 3-bay cooler. Increase the shelves on the wall right next to the register, and then, like I said, a third island in order to drive sales, get more product on the floor. So just the budgeting for this additional racks, $2,000 for floor repairs. Obviously, we're going to have to repair the floor. We move the wall back, put a new wall up, minor paint and touch up. Additional camera upgrades. I think we budgeted $5,000 for that. Like we stated earlier, camera system is outdated. Definitely needs to be replaced. New cooler is about $4,000. Okay, there it is. Security for it. The new security system is between $4,000 and $5,000. I got plenty of contacts in the construction world. They'd love to come out and put a new camera system in for us. We've already kind of contacted a few, just waiting for you guys to say yes. Next slide, please. Additional marketing. This is where I think that our business plan maybe set us apart. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with like Sip Whiskey or any of the other online distributors. They have mailers that go out. So I think that, coming up with just letting the community know, hey, look, this is what we have in stock, really advertise to them, just really put down, make it a store for the community. Hey, we have like a suggestion box, or, hey, look, we want a certain type of whiskey, we want a certain product. Just really listen to the people of the community and go after their business. Next slide, please. Digital marketing online, same thing. This is actually Sip Whiskey. This is what they use. They send out mailers every other day, just saying, hey, look, this is what we have in our stock today. Same kind of thing. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's 3 bars in Bonita currently, and I think that there's only one that uses them exclusively. And I think that there is an ability to drive sales to this also. Pick up all 3 bars and aggressively solicit other bars in the area. We'll streamline the system through online ordering and making sure there's no minimum vendor order. So when they call up, we can just deliver it. There's no wait, there's no hassle. Really provide that first class customer service. Next, please, Aaron. So also a huge thing, I think that providing staff training is huge, making sure that they are intimately familiar with different types of alcohol, knowing the difference between a bourbon and a whiskey, knowing the difference between rye. Just being knowledgeable of the product really helps drive sales. They can upsell everything at that point, but really educating everybody on what they're selling. Product knowledge is the key. I mean, the difference between us and every other liquor store will be the customer experience when you walk in. Our employees will be top notch. Next slide, please. Giving back with the companies that I own currently, we gave $60,000 to all the youth sports programs in Malala. That's actually where I'm from. Youth sports, I mean, I have 5 kids, and so they all play sports. So that's my favorite thing. So same thing with this, give back to the community. All proceeds will be given back to the Bonita, or the 1% will be given back to the community. The one thing that I guess I'd like to say before we finish this up is I feel like you guys are looking for a partner in this. I made a partner of Amazon. They're a huge company. I feel like working together is always better than working against each other. And, maybe not this store, but stores in the future, I'll be back. Trust me, if I don't get this one. But, just trying to move forward, make a partnership with you guys and be able to have open lines of communication and really just establish a good relationship with the commission.
That's not your time. You can keep going.
Oh, was it? I know it's my time. I was going fast because I was like, I'm not trying to get cut off. That's really all I have. I just wanted there, because everybody has great ideas. Everybody has a lot of good ideas. I think it's the relationship between us and you, or me and you guys, is really going to be the key to any successful business in this marketplace.
Commissioners,
any questions? What do you got?
Well, obvious. Live in Northeast.
I actually live in Malino. I live out in Timbuktu. It's about 2.5 hours away from Bonita, and it's a challenge. But the nice thing about my life currently set up is the companies I already own are already being managed. I spend minimal time, so my wife always tells me I don't know when to stop or I don't know how to take it easy, and so I'm at that point in my life where I'm looking for the next big challenge, and I feel like this is another challenge for me, and I'd like to, get on that track.
Commissioners? Good presentation.
I got a question. Mr. Josh Carr, he looks like he's going to be your business partner, 50/50.
Yes.
Is he here today?
He is not. I'm the face. He's the numbers. He likes the spreadsheets.
Okay.
He is my brother-in-law. He is still under the corporate yoke, if you will. I escaped that a few years back, and so we're trying to get him out in the same thing, be independent, be able to he already takes great care of my niece and nephew and my sister. But get him a little more freedom in his life.
Does he live locally down there?
No,
Neither one.
we already have an employee picked out. I have a bunch of employees. I already have approached one, just saying, hey, look, what do you think about moving to the Eugene area? And they were on board to move on down there.
Okay.
So I know it seems like long distance, but I mean, people went across the Oregon Trail. That wasn't so far then, it's just all a matter of determination in my mind.
And then last question,
Yes.
Chair, if I may. You and your wife started a very, very seemingly, it seems like a very successful business, growing your company
Yeah.
from 5 to 197,
Yep.
198.
Yeah,
What are you going to do with that business?
gonna keep growing.
You're going to keep it. You're going to.
So we're up for the multi-state contract with Amazon. We've been negotiating, so there's a chance that we triple in the next 2 years.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean I can't do other things. It just means that, I have to learn to manage my time better, make good decisions in hiring. I came from Costco and the motto there is teach, teach, teach. I teach all my employees as if they were owning their own company. And actually one of my best employees just got their own contract with Amazon through that motto. She is starting August 29th. She'll be servicing the Spokane area. So it's pretty life-changing for her. But my skills in life that I possess that are really good is I'm able to teach people. I'm able to train them. I'm able to show them how to run a company. I've been able to do it since I started at Costco. I mean, they taught me how to run the company. I just was teaching everybody from that point forward,
So the I-5 dance doesn't bother me. I've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Probably kept my family life together because no one tells me to roll over 3 nights a week.
Yeah. I was like looking at RV spots because I was just gonna pull my trailer down there for the first few months and figure it out.
But my question is,
Yeah.
other than the Costco model, what kind of retail background do you have? Because this is a retail operation.
Costco, I was in Costco for 12 years. That is my retail background. I ran stores for them. Everything from stocking shelves and pushing carts up to managing a $300 million store. I just worked my way up. I'm a grinder.
Okay.
That's what I do.
Commissioners?
Chairman?
Yes, go.
I've got just one question. What made you want to get into this business? You seem very successful where you're at.
Just diversification. My mom's always told me not to put all my eggs in one basket. And I think this is a good model. I think that obviously there's competition, but there's not a lot of outside competition. So it seems like a pretty straightforward business. And I do like whiskey a lot is another thing. So I'll throw that out there.
Thank you. Nice presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Chair Commissioners, last but not least, we're going to hear from Timothy Woodhead.
Good afternoon, Timothy.
Good afternoon to you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, Chair Ravel, Director Prinz. My name is Tim Woodhead. I'm the agent at Eugene West Side, the store that I've had for 9 years. Next slide, please. My West Side store is 10 minutes from the Bonita store. Between my store and Bonita is a very large reservoir and not much else. Personally, I live 5 minutes from my store, 10 minutes from the Bonita store. My children live in this area too. We actually have quite a few bars and customers who live in Bonita that choose to shop in my store. Next slide. If I'm appointed as agent, I'll split my time between Bonita and my West Side store. Nina, my wife of 38 years, will devote her time to the Bonita store, as will our daughter, Eleanor. Both of them have already been working in our store, so they know the systems well. My son, Paul, will continue to watch over the Eugene store, along with 3 longtime employees of ours. Today is our liquor delivery day, so it's all hands on deck. Otherwise, I'd have them here with me now. Prior to being appointed agent, I spent 20 years in the wine business. Nina was the business manager for a school district. I have a degree in business management. My wife has degrees in both accounting and finance. We've both been running successful businesses for a very long time. Next slide, please. As to Eugene West Side, it's a beautiful store, the type that people want to shop in. Wide aisles, very clean, light, great selection. We've added beer and wine along with a growler station. We've greatly increased the number of SKUs, especially for local products. Our sales have increased 1.4 million in the 9 years that I've had the store, which is about a 45% increase. And the vast majority of our sales are walk-in customers. We do a lot of hand selling. I run the type of store that people want to go to. In my yearly evaluations, all of my ratings have been outstanding. We've been listed in the monthly top 20 a bunch of times. More important, I think, is the 400 plus 5-star ratings that consumers have posted to our Google page. Next slide. As to the Bonita store we're competing for, these are some of the improvements I'd like the opportunity to bring. we've all talked about updating security. I've just updated my own security system and we'll do similar for the Bonita store, including a camera for the front exterior. We'll also be adding a security gate to the front exterior. Eugene is dealing with a terrible homeless problem. Bonita is no different. We'll be replacing the existing fluorescent lighting with brighter, more efficient LED tubes, similar to what I've done in my Eugene store. We'll expand the selection of local liquor products. I believe in local. I came from the local liquor industry. It was interesting listening to Director. Yes, thank you. Lost it for a second. But I lived that life for a long time, being on the road, getting our wine on the shelf, going back and making sure that Gallo or somebody else didn't move it away or stick it on the bottom shelf. I like local, and we're lucky to live in Eugene in an area with so much great local stuff. I digress. There's plenty of room for local gins, vodkas, etc. We'll be adding more of the red hot RTD category than they currently have. Next slide, please. Plan to move the office and cash registers. The office is currently in the back of the store. I plan to move it to the front, elevated behind the cash registers so that we can get work done between customers and also to show that there's somebody else in the store and watching. We'll also move one of the cash registers to the opposite side of the door so that people that are leaving have to walk past a store employee on their way out. We'll increase the hours. Currently, the Bonita store closes at 7. We'll be extending that to 8, similar to what our Eugene store does. We'll also open every Sunday, which is not currently the case. Next slide. I know you don't necessarily want to hear about non-liquor items, but this store is a few hundred feet from Ray's Grocery, as you've heard. So the opportunity is there for us to make a few extra bucks. And there's plenty of unused floor space in this store. Next slide. So I'll be putting in a growler station. I was one of the first to put one in my stores 9 years ago. People who drink good beer tend not to be cheapskates. Next slide. New wooden wine displays, similar to what I've done in my store. For my many years in the business, I know where the values lie. I like to look at these wooden displays and they're American made. Next slide. We'll also be doing our attractive window advertising. Our Eugene store has these friendly and inviting window overlays, which become effective advertising space, and we'll do the same thing in Bonita. I'll also be moving my ice machine to Bonita to get a new, bigger unit for my Eugene store. Because we're so close to the reservoir, we sell a ton of ice in the summer, so I've been looking for a bigger ice machine anyway. Next slide. This is the second time in 2 years that I've asked for this store. The outgoing agent made many of the physical changes that I had proposed back then and deserves credit for cleaning this store up. I can tell you from experience that everyone here is capable of running a liquor store. The question then becomes, do you want that to be the successful family that lives a mere 10 minutes away? I've spent my life in this business. I know it inside and out, and now my kids do too. You'll have trouble finding anyone more hands-on than me. I won't be hiring someone to run the store. We'll be at the store every day. Experience shows that with a store of this size, the math won't allow you to just staff it out. You have to be there and you have to work it yourself. I'm usually in my store 7 days a week, not because I have to, but because I enjoy working. My kids have that work ethic too. All 3 of them were college athletes. They know about hard work, perseverance, being on time, and finishing the job. It is not easy in high-priced Lane County to make the type of profit you would hope and expect. Wages and turnover are a big problem. Rents are out of control.
30 seconds.
I manage because I'm relying on family, not hiring someone to be there. We already own homes in the area, and because of that, we can afford to live there. We are invested in the area, and if you choose to appoint us, our stores will be a true family business for years to come. Next slide. I appreciate your consideration and welcome any questions.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. Very nice.
So I know it seems like I'm always in a liquor store. I'm in Sisters, I'm in Springfield, and I'm in West Eugene. So for those who don't know, we have a yacht club in Eugene. Yes, we do. What? It's the reservoir.
For the Fern Ridge Reservoir.
Yeah, they're small yachts, but you know, it's still yacht club. I know where the ice is going.
Very nice.
Yeah, I know where the ice is going. So,
Good idea,
thank you.
actually.
So, questions? Anyone? All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Great presentation. Thanks, Tim.
Great. So at this point, we're going to go into executive session to deliberate about the selection that we're about to rule upon. Thank you for your patience. We are reconvening after we make our announcement on for retail services. We are changing the agenda to deal with some changes that we're pulling, such as the advertising and buyout related business and liquor store discussion. And we will also be pulling the membership on the commission from the agenda. So do we have a motion for a decision on the retail services?
Chair,
Yes, Commissioner.
I move to appoint Tim Woodward as a permanent agent of Store 1190 Bonita, effective August 1st, 2023.
Laura, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Villegas,
Yes.
Chair Revolt.
Yes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Please come back.
Yes.
We need qualified applicants such as yourself. We will at some point, hopefully, as the world changes back to normal, look at new stores throughout the state, and we need your involvement. Thank you. At this point, I would like to take a look at alcohol, housing, and technical updates.
Oh.
Oh, no. Rules, forgive me. Oh. Oh, thank you. So the next, one moment. The next issue as it relates to after we reconvene is delegation of agent selection and delegation of authority to executive director. Now, we've already removed the decision on agents, so we've dealt with that. We've dealt with that. So now it's delegation of authority to executive director on retail sales agents agreements.
And Chair, I've got a motion for you.
Yes, Commissioner Ford.
I move to amend policy number 845-101-002, delegating to the director the following authority with respect to the appointment, termination, and suspension of retail sales agents and distillery retail outlet agents. 1, to propose termination or suspension. 2, to propose emergency suspension. 3, to appoint temporary agents. And 4, to renew agent agreements if the agent has a good history of compliance with the state liquor laws and retail agreement.
Laura?
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Villegas,
Yes.
Chair Revolt.
Yes. Thank you. We're moving on to rules.
Take like a 5-minute recess.
Certainly.
You got it.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Good afternoon. We have reconvened and we are now going to have some discussions around rules.
No.
Compliance. Which one?
Compliance.
Compliance. Michael. That's who I saw. Michael.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Michael Shine with the Administrative Hearings Division, and we are presenting 3 stipulated alcohol settlements for your consideration. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Commissioners? Commissioner Villegas?
They look good. They're not good.
You have a motion?
Well, I have a question. I'm sorry. I have a question, Chair. So this Capitol Cantina, right, where it was just a history of serious and persistent problems, is this not a situation where we can, you know, discussion of delegating authority to our executive director to stop, you know, where it, I mean, we had 2 deaths at this location. Can we not immediately suspend in these situations where we're talking about death and immediate public safety? Can we not delegate executive authority to the executive director to just immediately suspend a license?
So Chair Revolt, Commissioner Floyd.
Yes.
Excuse me, Mike, I'll check, I will jump in. You actually don't have to delegate authority because that is something that the director already has. I believe it's either in your rules or it's in the APA to issue what's called an emergency suspension. And the agency has done it before. There was another licensee in Portland that got shut down for exactly the same thing. So it could have happened. I don't know why it didn't happen here. An emergency suspension is really difficult to defend. So I don't know the facts of this. I'm sure that Michael can speak to it more, but that is an authority that the director absolutely has.
And I know that this was prior to our, you know, this is prior to your watch. So, Michael, can I ask you why in this situation did we not immediately suspend this license?
Commissioner Floyd, members of the commission, I really don't know exactly the answer. I can give you a little historical context, and that is that this occurred just immediately when premises were opening after COVID, and inspectors weren't even or were just getting back into the field at this point. And so, you know, I think if this had happened when we were up and running on a regular, in our regular mode from prior to 2020, there would likely have been a recommendation from public safety to our division to do an immediate suspension. I'm not aware that we received such a recommendation here, and but I'd have to check back, and I'm just not really sure as to why in this case it didn't happen. What I can say that is maybe on the more positive side, this is a terrible tragedy, there's no doubt. There's been a change in the security staffing at this premises, and the violent, I mean, there've been no further incidents involving gunfire. There's been pretty limited other kinds of violence, and so we do feel that the licensee's taken steps to show willingness and ability to control the premises.
So it's the same licensee then?
That's correct.
How long is this how long is this licensee owned and operated this business?
Yeah, and again, I'm sorry I don't have that information. I can get that for you later on. We could respond to you.
Okay, I would like to, Chair, I would like to take these individually.
Yes.
Or separate, yeah, okay.
I'll say that the licensee does have another business that they're operating more in the model of a sports bar and then as a nightclub, and has indicated that they want to revise their practice here and change the nature of the business to make it more like a sports bar kind of thing. Now there's nothing per se in this settlement that mandates that, but there are some very healthy restrictions that I think will put them in that category, including an earlier closing time, you know, absolute closing at 1 o'clock and drinks out of hand at 12:30.
I'll go with it. I'll go with it, but I think this licensee, and I want to go on record, if I still, you know, I'm hoping there's not going to be another incident with, this premises, because this is scary. This is scary, this is serious, and, yeah, I'm usually not terribly this passionate about, you know, this, but, you know, I am almost would like to see proposal of cancellation, license cancellation on this. Does anybody else have anything to say on this matter?
Yeah, that you ain't really good. Really, sorry. Chair, Commissioner Javon Porter, but really, that's pretty compelling because it is a life that was involved and lost. Two. So I'm glad that you gave pause. I really am. So, yes, so Michael, you said that there were some really robust restrictions placed. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. The restrictions require a lot of security at the premises. We're talking about a premises with a seating capacity in total of 129. Whenever they have entertainment, they would have to have 5 DPSST certified security guards on the premises. Otherwise, on Friday and Saturday nights, 4. If there's no live entertainment. Then Sunday and Thursday nights, 3, and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, which tend to be pretty quiet, 2 DPSSTC certified security. And I may have misspoke slightly. The sale of alcohol is prohibited starting at 12:30 a.m. And then drinks out of hand and closed to the public at 1. Another factor that was creating problems at this premises was a food cart out front, and an important part of the restrictions is that the food cart has to be closed shortly after last call, and the parking lot cleared of patrons, and that really is we found to be a strong measure to keep things calm and quiet. And to quell any problems. Also among the restrictions are requirements for video retention and providing it immediately on request, and retention for well more than, I mean, we don't have any requirement on an alcohol premise to have video in the absence of either enforceable compliance plan or restrictions like this. But for this, the video surveillance is required to be kept for 30 days and provided within 72 hours. And then there are drink limitations, using a jigger or a pouring device that's attached to the liquor bottle to measure pours, and ensuring that patrons aren't possessing more than 1 drink at a time, and limits on the size of those drinks. So altogether, it's a vigorous package, and we think that it should, you know, control. I mean, nobody can predict the future, so I can't sit here obviously and say we promise this won't happen again. We just have to make the best call we can under the circumstances.
I remember this case, and I really am glad that Commissioner Floyd paused on this one, because with these robust restrictions, it just seems as though it's like a babysitting constant or imminent bad behavior. And at what point does it become ridiculous, actually? So, I mean, would this agent even have gotten a license with this kind of behavior in the first place? I mean, I really concur. And 2 lives have been lost. I'm not okay with that, actually.
Yeah, and nobody's obviously okay with that. Unfortunately, sometimes these things happen at premises, and not every time does that result in a license cancellation. Because there can be a wide range of circumstances, you know, that accompany that. But I just want to assure the commission that nobody in the hearings division takes that situation lightly. And so we do have other cases where we have gone to and held firm on cancellation, or also done an immediate suspension, and it just kind of varies under the circumstances of a particular case.
How many times has law enforcement been at this premises since 2021?
Well, that's the thing, and I can't give you an exact answer, but I can tell you for certain that we have seen a marked reduction in incidents and in serious incidents over 2022 and into 2023. And that's the whole reason for bringing this to you as restrictions as opposed to cancellation. You know, we have to make an evaluation, because if we go to hearing, there is a notice of proposed license cancellation on this premises. I mean, that's what's being settled here. And if we go to hearing on that, we have to show to the administrative law judge that it's more likely than not only that there's a history, which I think we could show, a history of serious and persistent problems, but we also have to then go, and the licensee has an opportunity to show that they have the willingness and ability to control the premises. And so by showing a reduction in incidents through increasing their security staff, and perhaps they've got better trained security now, they may well be able to persuade an administrative law judge that in fact they do, in which case the administrative law judge under our precedents would not order cancellation, but would order restrictions, which is exactly what we're presenting to you. So as case presenters, and also in consultation with our director and with the executive team here, we evaluate whether we think perhaps they are in that position where they've now shown the willingness and ability, rather than taking that to the hearing for the administrative law judge to decide. We try to make that decision internally, and if we do feel that they have made progress along those lines, then we go straight to offering a settlement that has restrictions like this. So that's kind of the internal workings of the process.
Reduction, not elimination of bad behavior. And from what I recall, the local police, and you can correct me if I'm incorrect, the local police had been utilizing exhausting resources because of this one establishment. And you're saying a reduction. I would say an elimination, complete elimination of bad behavior.
Commissioner
Well,
Melinas.
we just canceled another premises, if you recall, that's in the same general area, and that was the one that testimony from the sheriff's office was that was the kind of the worst premises, and so this one I don't think is as high up on their radar anymore.
Actually, kind of the concern I was going with is, I mean, we've seen what's going on in downtown Portland. I mean, there's going to be bad stuff going on in the city that may or may not have something to do with the operator themselves. Like, I mean, they had a nice restaurant in downtown Portland, and if you went within a 1 block area, there's countless incidents now down there just because it's unfortunately become lawless to a degree. What if they had stepped inside I mean, we've got the process. I do think we need to look a lot harsher at it. And I don't even want to be playing devil's advocate on it, because I do completely agree with you both, but I just was trying to throw that out. It's unacceptable from what I'm seeing. It sounds like they've gone through it and know the process that we have to go through. But yeah, I don't know. The only fear I'd have is for, because do we like the gun incident? We know that was attributed to the license itself, correct or no?
Yeah, the double homicide that occurred in July 2021 was a situation in which there had been a physical altercation in the premises about an hour earlier. And appropriately, both parties were evicted, and that's what they're supposed to do. However, at some point, the reports indicate that somebody let one of the persons who was involved back inside, and the reports are kind of vague as to how they got let in. But they were let in and they shouldn't have been, and that is the responsibility of the licensee and their staffs, their security staff, to ensure that doesn't happen. And then that was the alleged gunman who was let back in, and that led to the other unfortunate events.
Yeah, that's nothing like what I was describing.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say with Commissioner, I agree to a degree with Commissioner
Yeah.
Lattis. However, we're not talking about the
No, we're not talking about the
vicinity, we're talking about on the premises. So I am really just gonna go on the record for saying that I don't wanna roll the dice about potential, a subsequent loss of life on this one.
I don't mean to cut anyone short, but we've changed our agenda in
Yeah.
order to make some adjustments for time frames. And
Yeah.
so each of you have the ability to vote as you feel necessary. So, Commissioner Floyd?
One last follow-up question, Chair, on just one last quick follow-up. What happens if there's another, violation at this premises with this Cat 1 on, his compliance record? What happens?
Well, if there's first off, even a restriction violation would be a category 1. And that would be a notice of cancellation. If there were, God forbid, a shooting, I feel confident that our public safety partners would very quickly be recommending to our division an immediate suspension, and that's what we would do. I mean, we prioritize those at the very top, and we get those done as quickly as possible.
Chairman?
Yes, it is.
This is really troubles me as well. They have a history of this kind of behavior that has now gone on for I don't know how long, and it's come up to the death of 2 people. And I don't know where we draw the line, but I'm very uncomfortable in keeping them operating.
So what if we want to propose license cancellation? Can we not,
Sure.
can we do that?
It's
I'm sorry, commissioners, you can certainly elect not to ratify the settlement, in which case the case that's pending, proposing license cancellation, would then go to hearing. And as I said, we would present the strongest case we possibly can, and they would likely defend, saying that they've got the willingness and ability to control. And then it's up to an administrative law judge to issue a proposed order, which of course comes back to you for you to make a final decision on.
Somebody dies. I'm just saying, okay.
So Chair,
2 people died.
Commissioner Floyd?
I move to ratify Sherry's of South Bend and Josiah Love alcohol stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff. I'm going to take the Capital Cantina separate.
Commissioner Curran, I'm sorry, Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Melitas,
Yes.
Chair Reval.
Yes. Commissioner Floyd?
Okay. In regards to the alcohol violations for Capital Cantina,
Say the same thing.
I move to ratify Capital Cantina alcohol stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Doherty,
No.
Commissioner Floyd,
No.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
No.
Commissioner Melitas,
No.
Chair Reval.
No. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, so we are rules.
In recess. Recess for working lunch.
Okay, we'll be back. They'll come back, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to recess for a working lunch. Thank you. Good afternoon. We are back in session. And I believe we have rules that we need to discuss and act upon. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Raval and Commissioners. For the record, Nicole Blase, Rules Coordinator for the OLCC. I'm here to present 4 rulemaking actions for your consideration today. Our first item for today is final action for artificially derived cannabinoids, the CBN rules package. In 2021, the Oregon Legislature passed House Bill 3000, giving the OLCC authority to regulate artificially derived cannabinoids in the adult use cannabis system. In December 2021, the Commission adopted OAR 845-025-1310 to implement that portion of House Bill 3000. Generally, OAR 845-025-1310 requires that artificially derived cannabinoids must either be determined to be generally recognized as safe or be the subject of a new dietary ingredient notification before they can be used in marijuana or hemp items sold in the adult use system. The rule also contains an exception allowing artificially derived cannabinol, to be used in products without meeting this requirement until July 1st, 2023. At this point, some CBN manufacturers have begun taking steps towards collecting the data and conducting the analysis needed to meet the general requirement for CBN, but none would be prepared to meet these requirements by July 1st, 2023. Staff has worked with industry, community partners, and other interested parties to develop a rule package to extend the deadline for CBN manufacturers to meet these requirements subject to conditions. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, commissioners. Dennis?
Yes.
Any questions?
Nope.
Chair, I move to amend OAR 845-025-1310 effective August 1st, 2023.
Laura?
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas.
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes. Thank you.
Excellent. The next item is initial action for the alcohol housekeeping and technical updates rules package. This rulemaking package addresses housekeeping and technical updates due to House Bill 2013. This bill is in response to the malt beverage lawsuit and allows a brewery located outside of Oregon to obtain permits from the OLCC that will allow the brewery to ship malt beverages that the brewery manufactured directly to eligible licensees and direct to consumers. As of today, the governor has not signed this legislation, but this is just an initial action to move forward. Senate Bill 1052, which has been signed. This bill modifies crimes related to involuntary servitude and human trafficking. Updating language addressing acceptable identification. Updating language addressing under the influence of intoxicants while on duty or consuming intoxicating substances while on duty. Updating language regarding the circumstances under which a patron may self-serve alcoholic beverages, such as self-serving from an already opened bottle of wine or a pitcher of beer. Updating the circumstances under which the commission may waive the service permit requirement. Updating sanction language regarding age verification equipment. And updating language regarding when a retail licensee may return malt beverage, wine, or cider to a manufacturer or wholesaler. Any questions?
One moment. Stacy,
Yes.
part of this rule change has to do with a law that has not yet been signed. If we approve this, would we void that?
No.
Or it would happen automatically at the signature?
No, it's, so I don't remember it, the tail end of it. There's usually something in there that says that you can take whatever action is necessary to implement the rules or implement the law. So, and also, this is just an informal direction to staff to begin rulemaking. You're not actually taking formal action to adopt the rules, so it would be fine.
Thank you. Karen?
Chair,
Yes.
I move to initiate rulemaking on this rulemaking package and to hold a rulemaking hearing at staff's.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner DePonte Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas.
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is initial action for the delivery of alcoholic beverages direct to consumers. As of today, the governor has not signed this bill either, but again, this is just initial action to move forward with rulemaking. This rulemaking package addresses technical updates due to House Bill 3308. 3308 requires parties who deliver alcoholic beverages direct to a consumer on behalf of an OLCC licensee to have an OLCC issued third-party delivery facilitator permit, and to ensure that delivery persons who deliver alcoholic beverages to the physical possession of a consumer have taken the required training. Any questions?
Commissioners?
Move to move forward with rulemaking at staff discretion on HB 3308.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner DePonte Porter,
Yeah.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes.
Lastly, we have the 2023 marijuana bill and technical package. OLCC staff proposed to initiate rulemaking to make technical amendments and corrections to administrative rules in Chapter 845, Divisions 25 and 26. Changes necessitated by House Bill 2931 and other agency concepts. Any questions today?
Commissioners?
Chair, I
Yes.
move to initiate rulemaking on this rulemaking package and to hold a rulemaking hearing at staff's discretion.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner DePonte Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Chair Raval.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, Craig, you have anything for the good? Commissioners? We are adjourned.